Chapter 126, Escape Marriage. Until this time, I thought that you were the kind of person who's unable to just rest, Masahiko said with a smile. It has been 2 weeks since the selection of the third hokage. Masahiko thought that even if Tobirama retires, he won't stay idle, and he will be busy all the time. Tobirama smiled, I think I've learned from you. Masahiko was stunned and nodded, yes, but if you have a long lifespan. What about your experiments? Masahiko hesitated for a moment then asked. I've destroyed my lab, and the captive has been dealt with. Tobirama said, I also recorded the Edo Tensei technique inside the scroll of seals. Masahiko was stunned, but Hiruzen will find about it this way. Tobirama shook his head, Hiruzen should have guessed already. And since he became the hokage, he should know about these dark sides of the village too. Dark sides, Masahiko sighed, forget it, developing the Edo Tensei was such a useful thing. With it, you and your elder brother will be much easier to resurrect. Tobirama asked, did you manage to perceive the underworld? Masahiko nodded, you just need to wait so I can get strong, or maybe this technique will find its next master, who knows? Tobirama's expression changed, its next master? Second grandpa, this technique. I know, Masahiko interrupted. One day, you might get summoned to fight me. Tobirama smiled bitterly, not knowing what to say. Then the two fell into silence until a familiar face broke in. Masahiko Elder. Lord Hokage. Sakumo subconsciously was about to call Masahiko, Grandpa, but when he saw Tobirama sitting there, he couldn't help but call him Elder after all. Masahiko didn't care, because he noticed that panicked expression on his face, so he frowned. What's wrong, Sakumo, what's the matter? Elder Masahiko, news came from the Uzumaki village, Yuna is gone. Masahiko subconsciously stood up, thinking that Kumigakure or Kirigakure took her. When did she disappear? Sakumo smiled bitterly, the report said that she was gone in the morning and she left a letter behind. Aunt Yuriko found it and hurried over. She left a letter? Masahiko sighed with relief, what did she say in the letter? Is Yuna pregnant? The letter said, the world is so big, and I want to see it all. Sakumo hurriedly replied. Masahiko's face stiffened, and he didn't know if he should cry or laugh hearing this. More than 10 years ago, he said the same exact sentence before taking that adventure to Kumigakure. I don't know where this little girl heard about it. After knowing the specific details of the situation, Masahiko was relieved slightly. A moment ago, he was ready to pay a visit to Kumigakure or Kirigakure. Aunt Yuriko went to Mito-sama, and it seems that Yuna has also taken Mito-sama's son with her. Ms. Hirama? Masahiko has always kept an eye on the development of that kid. In his view, Ms. Hirama will be the next Senjo patriarch. Masahiko was also startled, and he twitched his mouth, looking at Sakumo. Is this an elopement? No, Ms. Hirama is only 13 years old, and Yuna is 6 years older than him. But Sakumo is such a good-looking guy too. Masahiko was clueless and speechless. Tobirama sighed, second grandpa, let's go and chase them. It has been only a few hours. They shouldn't be gone far away, they're still kids. Masahiko nodded, I will go to Kumigakure, you go to Iwagakure, and Sakumo to Tsunagakure. We should be able to catch up to them. Sakumo hesitated, Elder Masahiko, what about Kirigakure? Masahiko shook his head, they wouldn't be able to pass through the Uzumaki clan's navy guards. And they can't go that far away if they chose to run on the water. Fearing a surprise invasion by Kirigakure from the sea, the Uzumaki clan has always put an elite squad stationed on the seaside there to guard. Then, I will go first, second grandpa. The moment he said that, Tobirama disappeared. Did he already put a flying thunder god seal in that direction? Masahiko murmured, Sakumo, you should also go, don't worry too much, Yuna is strong. Yuna has been obsessed with scientific research in recent years, and although she's only a Chunin, her messy equipment, which she put on her body, makes her stronger than the majority of Jonin. And the 13-years-old Ms. Hirama was also a Chunin. Sakumo nodded, then left in an instant. Masahiko sighed, then left the room, and flew toward Kumigakure's direction again. In theory, knowing Yuna's character, she should be curious about Kumigakure's research on the chakra diffusion cannon, so she probably took that direction. Masahiko flew all the way, but he didn't head directly to Kumigakure. They only left this morning. Even if they run all the way, 2 children wouldn't be able to reach the village this quickly. So, in the distance between Konoha and Kumagakure, is Yugakure. Masahiko got slightly startled and pondered. Is this Mise Hirama's chakra? Masahiko couldn't help but laugh. This is just a small village less than 30 kilometers away from Konoha. Isn't this so easy to find? Masahiko landed to find Mise Hirama leaning against a big tree, while his face was full of frustration. Masahiko had a bad hunch when he saw this. Sure enough, when he saw Masahiko, he gave him another letter. Grandpa Masahiko, I knew you're so fast, take this little fart boy back. I didn't have the intention to take him with me. Also, you don't need to look for me anymore. I secretly worked hard for 2 years to develop something that can block any perceptual technique. You won't find anything. Rest assured, though, 1 to 5 years, it'll go back. As for Sakumo, although he's a good person, I still hate his white hair, so don't you try to match us up. Masahiko took the letter and read it twice, not knowing what to say. Sakumo was issued as a good card, but this is not a forced marriage escaping. Looking at the frustrated Mise Hirama in front of him, Masahiko sighed, come on, you're going back with me, little fart boy. Masahiko used Shadow Clone, then sent it back with Mise Hirama, and he continued to chase her down with his original body. Going around for dozens of kilometers, Masahiko couldn't sense Yuna's chakra anywhere. Did she really develop a device to block perceptual abilities? Masahiko whispered, then turned, looking left and right. No way. Maybe she left Mise Hirama there and took another direction. I should have asked Mise Hirama just now. Masahiko sighed. Seeing that the sky was getting dimmer, he decided to go back to see if Tobirama has found anything. He has also developed a unique perceptual technique long ago. After returning to the village, Masahiko first went to Mito's house to find her scolding Mise Hirama. Yuriko was also on the side, looking a little anxious. Sensei, you're back. Yuriko didn't ask for the result as if she knew that Masahiko wouldn't find her. Yuriko explained before he could even react. Yuna has developed a bracelet-looking thing that can block all the fluctuations of the chakra inside the human body. After injecting chakra, she will not be perceptible even to perceptual abilities. Mito-sama has already confirmed it. Mito cannot perceive it too? Masahiko frowned. This is troublesome. Chapter 127, The Fuse. She's a genius. Maybe the fate of all geniuses in this world to be rebellious. Masahiko murmured while looking to the bracelet on his wrist. This was a spare on that Yuna left behind, which can block all of the chakra fluctuations in the human body. Masahiko couldn't even feel that he has chakra the moment he put on. Yuna developed such a thing from her own studies. This thing is not in the original, yet it's so convenient. Masahiko sighed and looked at Sakumo, who seemed really frustrated. Sakumo and Tobirama returned a while ago, but it was clear that they had nothing useful to share. Masahiko also handed Yuna's last letter to Sakumo. After reading it, he seemed puzzled. In the meantime, you need to inform the hokage, let him send some umbu to find her, but it needs to be done secretly, we don't want to make fanfare. Also, inform everyone that dealing with Yuna is gonna be dangerous. The Uzumaki clansmen's physical strength and seal techniques are very powerful, especially Yuna, who happened to be the daughter of the Uzumaki patriarch. It's not known how many big villages will also try to find her if they ever heard about her being missing. Sakumo nodded, I know. Masahiko looked at Yuriko again, who was anxious. Yuriko, don't worry so much, you have to believe in her. You know, when you were only 12 years old, I took you to your first battlefield. Yuna is 19 years old, and she has a very high IQ, Masahiko said, but it didn't help calm her down. When Yuriko was on the battlefield at that time, she had Masahiko to protect her, but Yuna left alone. Masahiko then looked at Mise Hirama, who has been continuously scolded for more than an hour now, and scratched his head. After taking a deep breath, Masahiko said, I kind of hoped that she would keep Mise Hirama with her. Yuriko remained silent for a moment, then she looked up to Masahiko, Sensei. Masahiko waved his hand, interrupting her, Yuna has spent all of his years in the Uzumaki village. Although she comes here often, not a lot of people know her. As the Uzumaki patriarch, if you show up in other villages, it will cause a lot of political problems. Let me handle it, I will use some shadow clones and head to find her. Yuriko seemed unsure about it, but Masahiko spoke again, "You should go back now, and try to cover the story of Yuna's escape. Don't let the word get out, the situation will be worse if the news reached the wrong people." Yuriko nodded, "Sensei, please find her." Yuriko then returned to the Uzumaki village. "Please." Masahiko smiled bitterly, "how would I found her in this vast shinobi world? It's not like I can call her, or use GPS." Masahiko actually didn't believe that he can find her at least in a short time, but he could only hope that there will be some surprising change of events soon, or maybe she will have enough troubles on the way and come back on her own. And talking about troubles, Masahiko glanced at Sakumo, "If this continues, there won't be a red-headed Kakashi, nor a grey-headed Kakashi." What was I thinking? I'm a forever loner, I can't be a matchmaker. Wait, isn't every matchmaker is also a forever loner? Masahiko shook his head and sighed. Unexpectedly, only 1 month later, Sakumo seemed like he got over it completely. Well, if he didn't seem to be too silent, Masahiko would have believed that he finally moved on. And as Masahiko expected, facing Yuna's black technology and high IQ, even the Umbu couldn't find her. However, Masahiko's shadow clones had some gain. He learned a lot of new things about every village in the shinobi world. During this time, a supernatural event occurred in the shinobi world, and every perceptual shinobi could sense that it was Masahiko's shadow clones. After he lost hope of finding Yuna, he launched Kagura Mind's Eye from every clone and then released them. Masahiko was disappointed every time he received a memory from his clones, but at the same time, it seemed kind of interesting. Actually, every clone's approach was exactly the same, indicating that he would have acted the same if he went out, but Masahiko didn't believe he was the kind of person who likes to do things on his own. In order not to be suspected by other villages, Masahiko used a wide range of Kagura Mind's Eye in Konoha, causing an alarm. Therefore, all the villages seemed to have experienced the same event, yet none of them managed to catch the person behind it. The major villages have been in a comfortable state for a few years, but that last incident caused turbulence, and they started to suspect and guard against each other again. It's estimated that as long as there's the fuse, an explosion is gonna be inevitable. However, the Tsunagakuer and Kumagakuer have really made it through with their researches on the Jinchuriki. Masahiko frowned. Masahiko's shadow clones still delivered some useful news. Tsunagakuer had successfully sealed the Ichibai into the body of a monk 2 years ago, but he was imprisoned due to his instability. The Hachibus Jinchuriki shared the same fate, but beyond Masahiko's expectation, the Nibi was relatively mature, and the Jinchuriki has even been able to mobilize its chakra for a short time. I've always felt that Kumagakuer is the most research-resourced village out of all the other villages in the shinobi world. Masahiko didn't hide this information and shared all he knew with Tobirama, who will naturally tell Hiruzen. Yuna wasn't found, which is good news. At least this has proved that she wasn't taken by other villages. It seems that since I didn't find her, no one will be able to do it either. Then, next, I need to deal with that other problem related to my strength. This month, Masahiko managed to level up his Gentle Fist attribute to LV7 and was pleasantly surprised when he looked at his status bar, that his body stat got enhanced by more than 100 points, confirming his previous guess. The second Shinobi World War will break out soon. One don't know which villages will try to attack the Uzumaki, but this time I'm gonna make sure that no one will even dare to have the idea of attacking the Uzumaki village ever again. In the days that followed, Masahiko devoted all of his energy to practicing the Gentle Fist style. In a flash, more than 2 years flashed, and it was almost 29th year since the establishment of Konoha. Yuna still hasn't been founded. Although Masahiko was worried, he had something to comfort himself. The Gentle Fist has made surprising progress. Probably the Gentle Fist Tai Chi is really more suitable for the elderly. Gentle Fist LV8, 110130/50000000. Unexpectedly, Gentle Fist is the first attribute to reach LV8 with no kinds of limit, which is really good news. Masahiko stopped his training and went to visit Tobirama in his house again. Tobirama's bod has already weakened to a sad point. It's estimated that it will take him a lot of effort to even kill a Jonin now. Except for Masahiko, no matter how strong a ninja is, no one can beat time. Masahiko could sense it, which made him sigh deep inside. Tobirama, I'm here to say goodbye, I'm going back to the Uzumaki village. Tobirama was surprised for a moment. Why? Masahiko shook his head. Well, just try not to die. I will certainly come to see you again. Is that so? Well, I'll do my best. Masahiko simply said farewells to a few people, then returned to the Uzumaki clan. Less than half a month later, the news came from Konoha. Konoha's second hokage, Senju Tobirama, passed away. Chapter 128, The Beginning of the Second World War. I'm being tortured again. Masahiko sat and sighed. Although he knew Tobirama will die due to the injury, he hoped that he will stay a little longer, and maybe the two of them will resurrect Hashirama together, but when he received the news of his death, Masahiko still felt sad. Masahiko wanted to attend Tobirama's funeral, but the thing is, he couldn't get out of the bed that day. Hiruzen arranged Tobirama's funeral, and as their allies, the Land of Whirlpool was required to attend. Thus, Masahiko asked Nanako, the First Lady, to go on his behalf. Grandpa, I've managed to control my chakra. A very clear voice of a girl emitted, making Masahiko come back to his senses. So fast, that's awesome, Kushina. Masahiko tried his best to hide his sorrow. At this time, Kushina was almost 5 years old, and it's also the most suitable age for the enlightenment education of the shinobis. For the princess of the Land of Whirlpool, and the mother of the protagonist Naruto, Masahiko chose to enlighten personally. Turning his perception slightly on, Masahiko was startled. This chakra, the extracted chakra that was coming out of Kushina's body, had a different feeling under Masahiko's perception. As Masahiko was puzzled, he suddenly felt that something was weird with the jar that he sealed half of the Kyuubi inside it, which made him shocked. The Kyuubi, who has been very calm for decades, his chakra suddenly became unstable inside the sealing jar. However, after using a few seals, it calmed down again. Grandpa, what is that? Kushina asked. Masahiko smiled, a disobedient little fox. Fox? Well, a cute little pet that you may have a chance to see in the future. Masahiko was just talking nonsense, but Kushina seemed always to listen very carefully. Does her chakra naturally restrain the Kyuubi? Masahiko murmured, but what is the reason? Is it completely related to her talents? Masahiko couldn't find the reason, so he just kept watching her. Grandpa, where is the little fox? Tell me more. Masahiko recovered with a smile. Now that you're still young, you will need to practice first. When you grow up, I will take you to Konoha to see the little fox. Masahiko hasn't found Minato in Konoha in recent years. In fact, he couldn't find anyone with the last name Namikaze. Finding him seemed to be kind of difficult, even the original didn't provide a lot of information about his family. Maybe I'm overthinking, maybe they were just civilians? Or maybe they're orphans. Masahiko kept watching Kushina, who was controlling her chakra before him, while still thinking about how to deliver her to Minato. Are you trying to be a matchmaker again? Don't you learn? Look to what happened to Yuna, you don't even know where she is now. Masahiko was worried. He knew that he wasn't the right man for the task, but he couldn't help it. I don't need to deliberately match them up. Masahiko learned his lesson this time. As long as I find a way to send Kushina to Konoha Ninja Academy after 2 years, everything will be fine. Masahiko didn't think of bringing Minato to Konoha, because even if it worked, he would need to find a way again to send Naruto later to Konoha. Otherwise, the plot will also collapse. Speaking of this, my witness point system is really stupid. Masahiko sighed. On the surface, it seems to encourage me to change the plot, but if I overdo it, the plot will collapse, and it won't reward me with any witness points in the future. The hard days passed by, and harder ones were coming in the 29th year since the establishment of Konoha. More than 1 month has passed since that sad day. In recent days, the shinobi world fell even more into turbulence, and Tobirama's death was the fuse that made the already insecure shinobi world sank into chaos. Both of their deaths led to breaking wars. Maybe I should die next to break out the Third World War. Masahiko was still feeling guilty. Great Elder, I caught another spy from Kirigakure. The name of this young man was Uzumaki Goya. His name was a bit weird, yet he's the only one out of the 3 kids that attended the joint Jonin exam who showed potential. Note, Goya means 5 pieces or buildings. He was very talented in Fuinjutsu, and just in 2 years, he grew much stronger, and became a team leader. You've caught another one? Recently, Kirigakure has become fiercer when it comes to targeting the Uzumaki village. Masahiko started to believe that they were the ones who destroyed the Uzumaki clan in the original. You don't have to ask me every time. If you catch one of them again, show them no mercy. Masahiko has also grown impatient and cold when it comes to Kirigaku's spies. However, after he finished his sentence, he noticed that Goya's expression seemed weird. In fact, he looked slightly stunned. I mean, just kill them. I understand, Elder Masahiko. Watching Goya leave, Masahiko scratched his head. When Masahiko came back, he found that Yuriko training the kids following the same methods Masahiko had used on Kanikiro, thinking that since it worked on that idiot, it will work on everyone. However, that caused all of them to grow as simple-minded as him, thus, Masahiko hurriedly corrected it. He didn't want the Uzumaki clansmen to be a bunch of Kenshiros in the future. I'm afraid that will certainly make the Uzumaki clan extinct. But the first generation has basically been finalized. Even if Masahiko tried hard, there was nothing he could change, the damage was dealt, but still, they were fine young ninjas with potential. Sensei. Yuriko came in, looking quite anxious. Masahiko startled, is it Yuna? Masahiko shook her head, then handed a letter to Masahiko. This was basically a request for help, which explains that the Tsunagakuer, Kumagakuer, Omegakuer are all about to move. It seems they have plans to siege Konoha. Sensei, what shall we do? Masahiko frowned, write back to Sarutobi and tell him to go find Kakuzu in Takugakuer. He will certainly help, and since Mito is there, they should have any problems. As for the part where he asked our help, explain to him that we may have some conflicts with Kirigakuer, and we won't be able to help. Sending off Yuriko, Masahiko felt helpless. Hiruzen is still not as good as Tobirama. If it were Tobirama, he wouldn't have come to ask us for help at this time. He would know that we're having troubles too. Wait, Hiruzen should be aware of our situation. Is he really asking for help? Masahiko didn't overthink and started practicing his gentle fist again. He wasn't fascinated by his age. However, he didn't suffer from grades decrease, because of the grade increases he gained. On the other side in Konoha, Hiruzen read Yuriko's reply, then handed the letter over to Danzo. I've told you that we shouldn't send for help. Since the Uzumaki clan has established a village on their own, they will also have troubles. Danzo smiled slightly, still, I had to try. Then he secretly thought, Hiruzen, you're still too naive. If we didn't ask for their help and got refused, the Uzumaki would have ended up asking for our help later. Hiruzen nodded, then we have to rely on ourselves. Mito-sama has also become old, so we will try to solve the problem without involving her. Hiruzen cared about Mito's health too. After all, he was Tobirama's disciple, and he was very close to Mito. Relax, Danzo responded, we can defeat Tsunagakuer without Mito-sama. I will personally lead the team. As for the other villages, I will leave them to you, Hokage. Hiruzen was stunned for a moment, then nodded, be careful. Chapter 129, Preparation before the war. Ninjutsu troops, step forward. Fuinjutsu troops, medical troops, step forward. Assault troops, on the side. The land of Whirlpool's coast shore, 3 consecutive cries emitted, and with that, the Uzumaki's army was divided into 3 queues. Masahiko's 3 disciples were in charge of the troops, and Masahiko appointed himself as the chief commander. Originally Masahiko didn't plan to mobilize the Uzumaki clan, he felt that he was enough to block the attacks. Unexpectedly, Yuriko took the initiative to let Uzumaki village join the war. According to her, in the last 2 decades, the standards of the average shinobi's strength of the Uzumaki clansmen have dropped by an entire level. If they continue to live comfortably, they may become weaker. Masahiko hesitated for a long time but still didn't refute. As a shinobi village, they will always face various dangers, and Masahiko won't always be there to protect them. Before his eyes, the scene was puzzling and unusual because what these people were holding in their hands weren't just everyday kunaos and shurikens, but also various weapons developed by Yuna previously. Unfortunately, in Naruto World, the amount of chakra conductive metal is not much, after all. Even if the Uzumaki village has been continuously collecting it over the years, and even though they bought some from Konoha, the numbers of the Baijuyu level chakra diffusion cannons were still only 5. There are also about a dozen less lethal. Then there are the miscellaneous things such as improved handguns, and 2 weapons like air guns. Masahiko tried all of them one by one. Most of these weapons were very effective against genin and chinin, but basically have no effect on a jonin. However, those ninjas. For those who weren't experienced in battles, these weapons would be very useful to them. Sensei, the shinobi troops are assembled, don't you want to say anything? Yuriko came to Masahiko's side and asked. Masahiko froze for a moment. Say something? Masahiko stepped forward, then slowly rose into the air, and looked at the slightly worried faces in the crowd, then sighed. Oi, is this all right? Yuriko should be the one talking to us. As a ninja, you must have courage. Otherwise, you will fall. Before him, only a dozen of shinobi, who were in their 40s and 50s, seemed calm. These people experienced the Warring States period when they were young, and their psychological qualities are much stronger than the younger generation. Masahiko looked at the few people who were whispering, then all of a sudden, everyone felt a sense of pressure. It wasn't just the cold stare on his face that alerted everyone, he actually applied a force field. In order to expand the range, he even secretly turned on the Sage mode. The silence controlled the field, and everyone's attention was turned to Masahiko. Masahiko withdrew the force field, and everyone in the place finally took a breath of relief, but the expression on Masahiko's face became even more serious, which made them look up. There's no time to talk about the reasons for this gathering, all of you should be aware. Masahiko shouted, Kirigakure has sent a number of spies in the past month, and nearly 10 of them have been caught, and others fleet. We estimate that there will be more. Fortunately, as long as I'm here, they will never escape my perception. However, we should expect the worst. 1 week has passed since the last spy we caught. I personally went to the coast but couldn't sense anyone. That is to say, Kirigakure has passed the investigation stage, and they have begun to prepare for an attack. In other words, the war is about to break out. The moment Masahiko stopped talking, everyone started whispering again, only a few could maintain their calmness. Masahiko sighed. He thought about many inspiring words in his heart, but he finally chose to use actual action to improve their morale. Chakra suddenly surged violently out of Masahiko's body. Even if there were a civilian present, he could still feel a burst of pressure at close range, but this time it was really imposing. Masahiko turned around and faced the sea. Senjutsu Dust Release, detachment of the primitive world technique. The dazzling white beam came out of Masahiko's hands and hit the sea dozens of miles away. Unlike hitting the land, there was no earth-shattering sound, but the calm sea surface got instantly shocked, and a whirlpool with a diameter of 1,000 kilometers appeared at the dust's impact point. The sea surface was rotating and descending, which caused a chaotic high tide for a while. It took more than 10 minutes for the sea to calm down again. But it wasn't the same case for everyone on the coast, they all looked shocked for a long time. Masahiko turned around again, and looked at the completely quiet shinobi troops, then nodded with satisfaction. Is that enough for you? As long as I'm here, we don't need to fear Kirigakure. Masahiko shouted again. The silence still controlled the place as everyone was immersed in the power of this sea-shocking ninja. After a long time, someone shouted excitedly, Great Elder! Great Elder! Masahiko waved his hand, and everyone became quiet again. With me, we will emerge victorious. But the battlefield will always hide surprises. You still have to be careful. Yes, Great Elder. We will win. Rest assured, Great Elder. The answers were endless. When they saw Masahiko's power, everyone became confident. Yuriko walked to Masahiko's side and smiled bitterly, Sensei, in the end, you're still focused on protecting us. I've told you that our shinobi need to participate in the war, but everyone is relying on you now, how will this help? Masahiko shook his head, I can't just watch. Since I'm still here, I will always protect you. I originally planned to solve this on my own, but I'm still letting the clan participate. But you know that a lot of people will lose their lives this time. Yuriko's expression became sorrowful, Sensei, as long as there's war, people will lose their lives, you know that, don't you? You can't protect every single person in the land of Whirlpool. Masahiko nodded, did you arrange that elite patrol, that we've talked about? Yuriko nodded, I have gathered them up and assigned each one of them into squads. I hope that they will manage to save a few people at critical moments. Since Yuriko suggested letting ordinary tribes join the war, she had some ideas to protect them. These people had a small amount of combat experience since they rarely had any task to take. Sending those people suddenly to the battlefield will be more like sending them to their deaths. To avoid unnecessary losses, Yuriko broke up the elite patrol and tasked every one of them with protection objectives, both to train the tribes and avoid too many casualties. Teacher, as long as you can handle all the shinobi above the S level, Nanako and I will also join the ranks of the protection troop, and we won't have any problems. Masahiko nodded. It's really not your style to train clansmen using war. But these arrangements are also very good. The three of you will take care of our clansmen, and I will eliminate the enemy. Watching Yuriko turned around to command the troops, Masahiko sighed. After her husband's death, Yuriko has really grown stronger. Wait, in other words, I'm not the chief commander? I'm more like a commissar. Chapter 130, Old B New A. An embarrassing thing happened. It has been a month since the shinobi forces assembled in the land of Whirlpool, but Kirigakure didn't make its move, as if they have cancelled their plans. The purpose of this gathering as time passed became more like a training course. Under the leadership of Masahiko's three disciples, the Uzumaki tribes started to look more and more like true shinobis. We're just waiting for others to bring us trouble. Masahiko sighed. The land of the Whirlpool doesn't have enough power to actually invade others. Although the numbers of the Uzumaki clan ninjas exceeds any other clan in the shinobi world, it's still too small compared with the 5 major villages. And if Masahiko goes personally, it will not be judged as aggression, but more like a massacre. What will he gain from that? Wars in this world are about profit, not destruction. That is called an act of evil. In fact, that's what united the 5 major villages for the first time in the original. Otherwise, Masahiko would have wanted to take the initiative to attack Kirigakure. Sensei. Let's work out together. Masahiko shook his head, watching Kanikiro rushing toward him. This old man's body is only suitable for gentle fist. Your hard-working methods don't fit me anymore. After practicing gentle fist, Masahiko's body stat increased by nearly 700 points, and has passed the 1500 mark. It got almost doubled. Compared with his previous training methods, the result is obviously better. What the hell are you training for anyway? Masahiko murmured, feeling very puzzled. The wars in other places started one after another as early as a month ago. The second war has already broken out in the shinobi world. Only the Uzumaki and Kirigakure were left. No, there's also Kumigakure. Masahiko squinted. Although they haven't completely stabilized, their position as one of the major villages is no longer shaky. Is it possible that they're waiting for Kumigakure? In fact, Masahiko completely misjudged Kirigakure's intentions. A month ago, Kirigak assembled its troops and was ready to attack the Uzumaki. Because of the continuous failure to seal the Sanbai, Kirigakure waited long to hit the Uzumaki. However, they really didn't take them seriously. Masahiko never encountered a Kirigakure shinobi in recent years, and he killed every spy he caught. Therefore, although they heard the stories about how strong is the Uzumaki elder, they didn't really know his specific strength. However, just after they left the land of water and crossed the sea, they saw a suddenly dazzling white light that hit the surface of the sea a few kilometers away, forming a huge whirlpool with a strong force field. Although the ninjas managed to walk on water and escape, all of their ships were destroyed. So it's not that Kirigakure does no longer want to attack the Uzumaki, they just don't have any more ships. You can't just rely on the ninjas to run on the water for tens of kilometers. Because they will have to station then on the borders to rest and risk getting ambushed. During this time, Kirigakure was trying to build other ships, and find the source of that white light. This unexpectedly extended the Uzumaki peacetime for more than a month, and if there are no accidents, it will continue for even more. However, accidents always happen inadvertently. For example, Kumigakure suddenly started moving, and they were stationed less than 50 miles away from the land of Whirlpool. When Masahiko got the news, he thought he misheard it. Unlike Kirigakure, Kumigakure's third Raikage has a very clear picture in his mind about how strong Masahiko really is. In fact, the scar on his right chest was always there to remind him. He has experienced Masahiko's 7th gate beforehand, and the Raikage's invincible shield that he was so proud of got broken at that time. In these years, he didn't completely disappear from the shinobi world, and the Raikage has no reason to think that Masahiko is dead. Therefore, it was surprising that Kumigakure dared to take the initiative. What gave them courage? Masahiko whispered. On his side, Yuriko said, "Sensei, it will be the same against Kumigakure, we will Masahiko waved his hand, interrupting, it won't work against Kumigakure. Kirigakure hasn't found a way to seal their Baijuyu. It can only be used as a decoration for the time being. However, Kumigakure has the Nibi's Jinchuriki who can control his Baiju's chakra, and Hachiba's Jinchuriki, even though he's unstable, but they can still use him on the battlefield. If we allow the tribes to join the battle, one missed block by me, and it will be a disaster. Don't rely too much on our chakra diffusion cannon, it is said to have the power of a Baijuudama, but a real Baijuudama is different after all. Yuriko remained silent for a while, then nodded bitterly, then it's up to you to solve it again. Masahiko shook his head, Kumigakure knows how strong I am, and they wouldn't have come if they weren't hiding something. The strongest possibility is that they have formed a temporary alliance with Kirigakure. So you need to be here, they will need you more. Yuriko hesitated, Sensei, what if they have other preparations, are you gonna be okay? Masahiko smiled, even if they have prepared something, they prepared it for the grandpa they knew from 16 years ago. I'm a different grandpa now. However, I'm worried about your side, in case the Kirigakure's forces came well, in short, I will try to go back quickly. Yuriko nodded, Sensei, be careful. Without saying more, Masahiko stood up and flew towards the location. He didn't want the battlefield to end up being located inside the land of Whirlpool, because it would cause unnecessary damage. It would be best to intercept them outside. However, the enemy's speed was beyond Masahiko's expectations. As soon as Masahiko flew to the border of the land of Whirlpool, he sensed a large number of chakra fluctuations rushing toward him. Masahiko landed slowly, then a large number of ninjas appeared before him in a matter of seconds. They were headed by the third Raikage. Upon seeing Masahiko, he waved his hand to stop the troops behind him. Masahiko frowned, feeling that something was wrong. I haven't seen you in years, dude, did you lose weight? Masahiko wasn't just ridiculing, in fact, looked thinner than 10 years ago. Uzumaki Masahiko. Gritted his teeth and shouted Masahiko's name, thank you. Masahiko froze for a moment with a blank face, what? Didn't say much before he suddenly flickered and disappeared. Heavy style outburst. Although it has been more than 10 years, I chose to greet Masahiko the same way. However, it was a really long time ago, and Masahiko's style has changed. He gently lifted his right hand, and with great force, he struck his elbow. At that moment, the chakra burst out of Masahiko's palm, then his elbow turned inward, hitting his chest, emitting a weird bone-twisting sound, and knocked back 10 meters away by his own strength. Raikage-sama! Several shinobis exclaimed. Masahiko straightened up, then gently moved his hand up in front of his face and closed his eyes, fly yourself to death style. Don't try this at home, kids. Masahiko wouldn't have been able to do such a thing with just normal taijutsu. Gentle fist style combines both taijutsu and chakra, and it can enhance the user's physical strength if he can fully control his chakra. Masahiko then observed Raikage's body carefully, then sighed. Did you try to increase your speed in order to be able to avoid my dust release? IMHO, you are more suitable for a tank class, not for an assassin class. Obviously didn't understand a word and didn't care much also, so with a wave of his hand, 2 ninjas stepped forward. Masahiko looked at them. Unexpectedly, one was the Nibi's Jinchuriki, and the other was the Hachiba's Jinchuriki. Aha, if you just didn't pull out this move, this battle would have been interesting. But you've bored me a little now. Chapter 131, Misunderstanding. The northern side of the land of Whirlpool, sounds of collisions, frictions of weapons, screams, and exclaims were all mixed together. In the middle of that, Masahiko was really enjoying the feeling of practicing martial arts. He was really eager to say, do you want to dance with me? With pleasure, as he was really dancing in the middle of the battlefield. However, he wasn't really hitting anyone by himself, they were actually fighting each other. The gentle fist technique will also teach you how to stand longer in the battlefield while moving gently and using others' power against them. Brother, we can't do this anymore. Not far away, the Hachiba's Jinchuriki came to his side and spoke solemnly. This old guy's taijutsu is really troublesome. He didn't use such a thing a decade ago. Said bitterly. Just now, he thought he had the opportunity to strike him off guard, but he almost killed 2 of his allies. Raikage-sama, we must let ordinary shinobis retreat. He's not even using chakra against them. The Nibi's Jinchuriki stepped forward. A hesitated, then shouted, "All of you fall back." Many of Kumagakure's shinobis breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this order. They were really worried that they would accidentally kill one of their own if this continued. However, a sudden pulling force made some of them who had just stepped back, rush in involuntarily and fight each other. "Aren't you going to follow the orders?" the Reikage shouted angrily. No one had time to answer him. Therefore, Masahiko smiled and explained, "It's not like they don't want to follow your order. I'm the one who's preventing them." As face darkened, "B. Understood." The Hachibus Jinchuriki responded. Huge tentacles suddenly extended out of his body, but they weren't targeting Masahiko. Instead, it grabbed the Kumagakure shinobis in front of Masahiko and moved them back. Masahiko was stunned. He's obviously not capable of controlling the Haxabi. Why did he dare to use its power? Isn't he afraid that he will break the seal? "You're gonna die, Uzumaki Masahiko." The ground cracked under his feet, then out of thin air, he appeared in front of Masahiko. Hell stab! 4 fingers. The lighting condensed on his fingertips and sharpened. It seems like A has brought his strongest spear with him this time. His power and speed Masahiko didn't get used to it yet, so he just avoided A. A stopped, then turned over to face him again, laughing. "It seems that this weird taijutsu you're using has limits after all." Later he retracted one finger. "There isn't any limit, but you can try and see for yourself." Masahiko frowned because he could feel that the other two were already closing in behind him. Shinra Tensei. With Masahiko in the center, the strong field force caused the two to fall out. "Sneak attacks won't be enough. But I'll deal with you two later." Masahiko wasn't planning on ignoring A any longer and rushed toward him. Lightning release, escape. Water release, water rushing. The two Jinchuriki were the ones who used these two techniques, which were more powerful combined. At the same time, a bright red tailcoat gradually covered their bodies, as if they didn't fear that their Baijuya will try to break the seal. Masahiko teleported to the other side using his special shuriken, but he didn't have time to deal with them because A was rushing toward them. 3 fingers. As strength and speed were much improved. With a wave of Masahiko's hand, A passed right beside him. Although it didn't connect, A smiled proudly, then he retracted one more finger, obviously thinking that Masahiko's taijutsu has reached its limit. 2 fingers. Masahiko's expression became tense, as he was trying his best to move his hand a little bit to the side, but the latter has almost hit Masahiko's shoulder. "Stop this." 1 finger. Facing A, who was about strike again, the expression on Masahiko's face changed completely, then sighed. "Goodbye, third Reikage, A." Combined with gravity, a stronger field force burst out from Masahiko's palm, and using his gentle fist style, he struck his right hand, drawing it violently toward the left side of his chest. Blood suddenly splashed. "What were you saying?" Masahiko smirked, looking at the third Reikage, kneeling on the ground before him. "However, this will only make you suffer. Let me put you out of your misery." Tailed Beast Raise Non. The Raise Non condensed instantly, and he was about to hit his left side chest with it and finish the job. "Big brother!" The Hachibus Jinchuriki was too late and couldn't help but exclaimed. He seemed really unstable at that moment, obviously, his seal was about to break. "Reikage-sama!" Anxious cries came from all around the battlefield. But A in front of Masahiko suddenly raised his head, and black thunder suddenly burst out of his body. "I'm not so easy to die." His right fist waved from the bottom down, completely catching him off guard. Masahiko didn't expect such a sudden move, so he couldn't just block it using his gentle fist. Therefore, he blocked it with his arms and fall back a few tens of meters. "He still has such power?" Masahiko frowned. "Lightning release, 16 pillar bind." A shouted, and suddenly some jonin came out from the sides to complete the sealing process, while Masahiko couldn't move because the 16 pillars trapped him inside. The pillars were filled with lightning and ready to strike him to death. However, Masahiko wasn't feeling ready to get electrified. The Haxabi's Jinchuriki acted violently, like if he was a madman, and all of a sudden, the chakra burst out of his body. At the same time, the Nibi Jinchuriki opened his Baijuya mode, and the two started condensing Baijuudama at the same time. In Masahiko's perception, the two Baijuudama were actually rotating and merging all together, which increased the power several times. Can two Baijuudama be merged? How are they doing that? Masahiko didn't have time to guess and immediately activated his Sage mode. Masahiko then took a deep breath and went all out, Shinra Tensei. The 16 pillars burst instantaneously. With Masahiko in the center, the range was several hundred meters. This attack caused the Baijuudama to dissipate. Masahiko also heard several screams. The Reikage got hit and flew out 100 meters away, while the two Baijuya rolled back several times. After everything calmed down again, Masahiko looked up and saw that the spot where he's standing was already the lowest compared to his surroundings. The coverage of his Shinra Tensei just now was around 1/5 of the one pane launched in Konoha. So I wouldn't have achieved the same result even if I've done my best? The Rinnegan is really powerful. Masahiko jumped out. Reikage-sama, are you okay? Two shinobi, who were obviously medical ninjas, helped A out of the rumbles and started treating him. Some ninjas out of his technique range were watching him with great vigilance. However, since they were trying to keep their distance, Masahiko estimated that most of them were Chunin. The Nibi and the Hachibus Jinchuriki didn't suffer much damage, and they were already standing. Masahiko was about to continue his attack, but he suddenly sensed a lot of chakra fluctuations rushing from the east side toward the land of the whirlpool. Kirigakuer? Masahiko frowned, are they already here? No wonder you dared to attack our Uzumaki village, you were waiting for Kirigakuer to join the battle. A raised his head, and pushed the medical ninjas, who were helping him away. What? Kirigakuer. I'm not trying to attack the Uzumaki village. I'm here to take my revenge from you. Even if it costs me my life, I will kill you today. Masahiko was stunned. Feeling that I wasn't trying to lie, his face turned pale. This is a misunderstanding, a big misunderstanding. Masahiko muttered. However, this wasn't a misunderstanding, he's actually the one who made it. Chapter 132, Limitless. In Masahiko's perception, the Uzumaki forces have already confronted Kirigakuer's shinobis, and they were moments before engaging. I can't play with you anymore. Masahiko rose to the sky. Dust release, detachment of the primitive world technique. In seconds the white light came out of Masahiko's hands and went straight to the shinobi troops behind the Reikage. However, a huge tentacle came out, and with that, Masahiko's original idea of clearing the stage failed, and he could only get rid of one tentacle. My tail! Damn it! The voice of the Jinchuriki has been completely changed, replaced by the sound of Jayuk that Masahiko was familiar with. So the Haxabi got full control of his body? I have an idea. Tailed Beast 8 twists. The Haxabi suddenly tightly coiled this tails around himself, then spun at high speed, creating a strong gust of wind and causing massive damage to his surroundings. At this time, it had no regard for any accidental injuries. If you're one tail short, don't try to use this technique again. Sage Art, Storm Release, Light Fang. Masahiko spat out 7 light fangs and nailed the remaining 7 tails to the ground one by one. Seeing how the Haxabi was struggling, Masahiko planned to seal him first, but as he was doing the hand signs, he suddenly frowned. The Reikage rushed toward him at high speed, then he suddenly coughed blood. Reikage-sama. The voice of the Nibi's Jinchuriki was still the same as before, he could control the Nibi's chakra after all. Reikage-sama, your injury. A waved his hand, it's okay, we need to take advantage of the fact that the Haxabi is temporarily on our side and kill Uzumaki Masahiko. Kill me? How dare did you ever heard of Shadow Clone? Masahiko used one clone to seal the still struggling Haxabi and rushed toward A with his original body. Dust release, detachment of the primitive world technique. The Nibi tried to counter with his firework, but the dust release was unstoppable. And in a flash, the blue demon cat disappeared from the scene. Lightning oppression horizontal chop. He didn't know when, but the Reikage suddenly appeared above him, then chopped him down with his leg. Masahiko was about to flash around, but he suddenly heard shouts coming again around him. Earth release, Earth style wall of 10,000 Ri. Earth release, Earth style of ascension. Several ninjutsus jointly used by the Kumonin covered the entire sky in an instant, creating a dome-like pot cover, and blocking all the escaping routes. Masahiko frowned, did they only trap me and the Reikage inside? Well, Shinra Tensei. The repulsive force burst out violently, but Masahiko was surprised upon seeing that the third Reikage was only moved by a little, and actually resisted it. The ground under Masahiko was actually getting shattered, and he was losing his foothold. Masahiko frowned. It would be really embarrassing to get pressed down, thus, Masahiko used both hands and increased the chakra output. Shinra Tensei. This time, Masahiko shouted, and A could no longer hold on, crushing newly formed dome. As face is already dead grey, he's really trying so hard. Masahiko felt that the two sides must have already started the battle. Frowning, he whispered, "Can't stay here anymore." Seventh gate, Gate of Wonder, Kai. You've finally used this technique? The third Reikage said disappointedly, then he shouted, "All, hold him down, he can only maintain this state for 5 minutes." Masahiko squinted, "Is that so? Even if it's only 5 minutes, what can you do to stop me?" Sage Mode, Storm Release, Laser Circus. Masahiko didn't rely on the dust release anymore, it was indeed powerful, but it's not suitable from fast opponents. A flexible nature of chakra, such as the storm release, is much more convenient against the Reikage. Bijouudama. The Nibi has finally recovered his chakra. It seems that the last confrontation didn't actually connect, and he got only slightly injured. And once again, he engaged the battlefield with his powerful ability that he fired at the laser circus. Upon the impact, the two techniques immediately cancelled each other. "I will finish you first." Bansho Tenin. Masahiko extended his right hand and pulled the Nibi with a manipulating attractive force. "You can't hide this time, Sage Art, Storm Release Light Fang." Masahiko spat out 2 sharp white streams of light this time. At that moment, the Nibi's face turned pale, not because he was trapped, but because the third Reikage suddenly flashed in front of him, and blocked Masahiko's technique with his body. Masahiko frowned, "It seems that you really don't plan to go back alive after this fight. I'll see you later then." Masahiko moved his hands quickly and performed the signs, Sage Art, Dust Release, Detachment of the Primitive World Technique. The proficient in lightning release third Reikage wanted to use his speed of light to dodge Masahiko's attack, but he suddenly coughed blood and knelt halfway. Suddenly a huge tentacle appeared and saved him again, then got cut at the same time. "Come here, you bastard!" Masahiko's shadow clone had only less than 10% of chakra. It was trapping the Hokage for so long, and it has reached the limit. "Reikage-sama!" Several exclamations echoed around the field as some of the remaining Jonin rushed again to the scene. Masahiko glanced around, and there were only less than 30 shinobi left who were able to stand, and A, who was slowly dying. "Uzumaki Masahiko!" A gritted his teeth and stood up again, which startled Masahiko slightly. "Why do you hate me so much? I just wanted to kill the Golden and Silver Horn brothers." Masahiko closed the gates, then looked at the remnants enemies on the opposite side. "If you die here, I'm afraid that the 5 major villages will become 4. Speak for yourself, old man, you can't maintain that state anymore, it's your loss." A said, then coughed blood again. "Reikage-sama!" Everyone besides him spoke with concern and looked at Masahiko with evident hatred. "It's just not necessary to continue to use it." Masahiko shook his head, "Also, the only person who's allowed to call me old man is Madara. It's time for you to die. Farewell." Masahiko rose to the sky, then he extended his hands. Sage Art, Dust Release, Ultra Detachment of the Primitive World Technique. The Nibi and the Hokage condensed one huge Bijouudama again, then they fired it at Masahiko's Dust Release. After the huge explosion, Masahiko smiled. Sage Art, Dust Release, Ultra Detachment of the Primitive World Technique. Just like the other 8 LV attributes gave Masahiko a special effect, Masahiko's 8 LV Dust Release grant him an enhanced version of the Detachment of the Primitive World Technique. Moreover, this improved version is about 5 times stronger, but it only costs twice the amount of chakra. The Nibi and the Hokage once again fire a huge Bijouudama in a try to stop Masahiko's Dust Release, but it got instantly shattered, and the remaining defensive earth releases instantaneously collapsed, leaving nothing but the aches of its casters. Nothing could stop it. Suddenly familiar Chinese characters appeared before Masahiko, witness and completely change a side story of Naruto World, the death of third Reikage. Reward, 10 witness points. Dead, hi? Masahiko had mixed feelings about this. The third Raikage gave him a good impression in the original when he helped the younger generation seals him. Inexplicable hatred. Masahiko sighed, turned around, then headed toward the battlefield where Kirigakure and the Uzumaki were fighting. He could sense that he had only 40% left of his chakra. 60% of my chakra got completely wiped out on Kumigakure forces. With this, people should start calling me Uzumaki D. Masahiko. It's so lonely to be invincible. Chapter 133, The Pride of the Bones. Masahiko flew all the way hurriedly back to the battlefield. In his perception, he could sense that his three disciples' chakra was still strong, and they didn't seem injured, which made him slightly relieved. Yes, with the current level of the Uzumaki clan, facing Kirigakure, they would handle themselves fine even without me. Masahiko scoffed. However, as soon as he reached the battlefield and saw the result, Masahiko severely face-palmed himself. The Uzumaki forces ended up retreating under the Kirigakure siege. If they weren't equipped with Yuna's special weapons, they would have suffered serious casualties. Masahiko looked up then back, then he sighed. That idiot! In the distance, a few bloodline limit users from Kirigakure created a huge ice crystal maze and trapped Kanikiro inside it. The latter kept running in circles, but he couldn't get out. No wonder we were inferior. Besides missing Kanikiro, Yuriko was besieged by the 7 legendary swordsmen, and Nanako could barely hold back the third Mizukage. Masahiko landed quickly, and several Kiri shinobis, who were secretly approaching to destroy the Uzumaki Churka diffusion cannon, were instantly blown away by a repulsive force. Great Elder! Great, the Elder is back! Hearing the cheers, Masahiko sighed slightly. The Uzumaki needs a lot of improvements. Masahiko nodded slightly to the clansmen, rescued a few who were in a crisis, and immediately flashed beside Yuriko. He glanced at these 7 swordsmen who were very familiar to everyone. However, Masahiko could only remember what the fat one was called, Puffer Fish. He was the one who ironically got eaten by a shark. The others looked very young, kind of different, but all of them should be the familiar ones from the original. Note, Fugyuki Sukazan, his first name literally means puffer fish. Kisame, literally means shark. Yuriko breathed a sigh of relief. Sensei, did you handle them? Masahiko nodded. Kumigakure is completely destroyed. He didn't say any more and looked at the 7 swordsmen in front of him. Here comes another one to die. The one who said this was wearing a black blindfold in his right eye and was the master of the legendary sword Shivuki. Masahiko shook his head. Yuriko, you help Nanako. I will handle them. Yuriko nodded, then immediately rushed toward Nanako. The black blindfolded guy scoffed. Did you hear that? He said he's gonna fight us alone. Be careful, Jinpachi, that old guy should be the great elder of the Uzumaki clan. He actually witnessed the Warring States period and fight alongside some legendary shinobi. Masahiko didn't have time to speak to them and shouted trough the battlefield. 7th Gate, Gate of Wonder, Kai. Daytime Tiger. The tiger-shaped chakra release was formed by the impact of his body technique, then instantly broke the huge ice crystal maze behind them, and killing a bunch of shinobi. Then Kanikiro instantly jumped out in a blue stream and came to Masahiko's side. Masahiko's face went completely black. What took you so long there? You could obviously destroy it using your strength. I've told you so many times don't use your brain, you don't have that kind of thing, remember? Kanikiro smiled stupidity. Sensei, I didn't expect it to be such a complicated maze. Of course, it's complicated because those shinobi outside were changing it constantly, so no one can get in or out. Hurry up and help the clansmen. No, since you've already opened the 7th gate, you can solve these 7. It was more suitable for Masahiko to go and save the clansmen instead because Kanikiro could maintain this state longer. Yes, Sensei. Kanikiro responded. Old man, I think you misjudge the situation. Were the 7 legendary? Before he could finish his sentence, Kanikiro struck him a punch, hitting his chest, and sent him flying out. Masahiko nodded, then he flickered away. At this time, the 7 legendary swordsmen were still young and experienced. Moreover, Yuriko fought against them for a long time, and they've used a lot of chakra in the process. Kanikiro, who opened the 7th gate, should be able to handle them quickly. Storm release, laser circus. Back to the battlefield, the laser sent from Masahiko's hands, waved and flowed left and right between the crowd, and killed dozens of Kiri shinobi. Great Elder! Several patrol shinobi from the Uzumaki came to Masahiko's side. Follow the arrangement of the patriarch to protect the clansmen. Yes. Masahiko's remaining chakra was less than 40%, but with Yuriko's help, they managed to get rid of most of Kiri's strong shinobi, and it was more than enough for the remaining. Shadow Clone Technique. Although Masahiko's chakra is not much, his 40% chakra is 3 or 4 times bigger than the average S-class shinobi, so he split more than 20 shadow clones and rushed to the battlefield. The result after this was an overwhelming victory for the Uzumaki side. Whenever the clansmen were in danger, Masahiko's shadow clone will appear in time to rescue them. It was not until they lost half of their troops that Kirigakure reacted. As for the Uzumaki, since Masahiko arrived, there were no more casualties. Suddenly several ninjas from Kirigakure secretly surrounded Masahiko. It's him. He's the old guy who wiped out our clan. Avenge our ancestors. Masahiko was surprised that he almost got hit. Looking at the familiar dresses on the opposite side, Masahiko seemed like he realized something, then sighed. Kagaya clan? And not a single one of them has managed to awake his bloodline limit. They really wasted the glory of their ancestors. Wind release, pressure damage. Masahiko used some hand signs, then casually chose one of the B-class techniques to finish the few people on the opposite side. Masahiko still vividly remembers the sacrifices of the Kagaya patriarch and his great elder for the sake of the next generations, and how the Kagaya clan invincibly stood on the peak of the world next to the Senju and the Uchiha in the Warring States period. However, all of that was for nothing. After more than 40 years, the clan has completely fallen into the lowest of ranks. As he pondered, Kanikiro limped over, carrying 3 long swords of different shapes on his body. Masahiko frowned, looking at him. What happened to the other 4? Kanikiro nodded. That shark-skinned sword was a little weird, it absorbed a lot of my chakra, I feel a little bit weak, sensei. Shark-skinned? Oh, I understand. Masahiko forgot to explain the ability of everyone's sword to Kanikiro, but in fact, he wouldn't have remembered anyway. Kanikiro, take these swords and rest. The war should be over. It's over, sensei. Both Yuriko and Nanako came over. The third Mizukage. He ran away, sensei, Yuriko replied. Masahiko nodded, I understand, then, let's end this war. On the battlefield, Kirigakure's ordinary shinobi were still fighting, apparently, they didn't know that the Mizukage has left them there and fled. Yuriko and Nanako joined the battle again, and with this, the Uzumaki clansmen training ended. Showing no mercy, they immediately stopped the war. Unexpectedly, the last remaining Kirigakure's shinobi, who were about 100, actually surrendered, which might be because they realized that the Mizukage abandoned them. Masahiko didn't find any clansmen from the Kagaya clan among these people who surrendered, so he felt a little bit relieved. Fortunately, although you have lost their glory, you have never forgotten the integrity of your ancestors. Chapter 134, The Spoils of War. When the war came to an end, Masahiko sat down to restore his chakra. He used a lot of shadow clones and also summoned out slugs to heal the clansmen, so he pretty much consumed all of his chakra. The uninjured clansmen were cleaning the battlefield, and Masahiko could feel that some of the clansmen have already improved during this war both physically and spiritually. But there were also things that made him sad. In this war, the Uzumaki lost more than 70 clansmen, most of them were before Masahiko joined the battlefield. This clan seems to always suffer the moment Masahiko leaves it. There were also a lot of injuries, but none were severe such as losing a limb. About an hour later, Yuriko came to Masahiko, Sensei, we've cleaned up the battlefield. Nanako personally sealed the chakra of the 100 shinobis who resisted. What should we do about the others? Masahiko nodded and stood up, he has recovered most of his chakra by that time. First put them in prison, then let's bury the others who died in the war. Yuriko nodded. The last time the Uzumaki needed to hold a large-scale funeral was when they fought against the Kagaya clan. The funeral was held on the second day of the war. Gensuke was the one who made the arrangement. After the funeral, post-war trivia was put on the agenda. The spoils of war, in addition to some ninjas' bomb papers, the most significant crop was the 3 legendary Sword of the Mist seized by Kanikiro. Masahiko couldn't remember them one by one, but still, he could figure which ones they were after testing their abilities. They were the Sewing Needle, Nuiberry, the helmet splitter, kabutori, and the splash, shivuki. Masahiko couldn't use any of them, so he handed them to Kanikiro, it was his loot anyway. Besides, they obtained other gains from the Kiri ninjas, who surrendered. After interrogation, the ninjutsu inventory of the Uzumaki clan became more abundant. Initially, because of Masahiko's own reasons, in addition to the water release that he isn't good at, other ninjutsu collections were sufficient. The water release is kind of supplemented. Masahiko backed up some of the common ninjutsu but didn't touch any of the water release secrets. He didn't lack a special ability to use for now. Besides, there were so many ninjutsu to choose from. At the end of the interrogation, the disposal of these enemy prisoners of war was put on the agenda. There's no such thing as slavery in the shinobi world, and it wasn't reassuring to let these ninjas join the Uzumaki clan. Also, it felt a bit bad to kill all of them. Thus, after careful consideration, Masahiko made a decision. We'll ask Kirigakure to redeem them, and ask for more supplies as a price. Yuriko hesitated, Sensei, what if Kirigakure doesn't want to redeem them? Masahiko smiled, shaking his head, then we tell these more than 100 frustrated people that Kirigakure didn't want to redeem them, and we sent them free. Yuriko froze for a moment, release them? After a moment, she nodded in agreement. There's one more important thing about Kumigakure. Masahiko spoke slowly, Kumigakure has suffered heavy losses this time. In our last confrontation, I killed the third Raikage, the Jinchuriki of the Nibi and the Hatch Ibis. There's no way for them to rise after that, I'm afraid they will gonna lose their sit as one of the major villagers. Yuriko, have you ever thought about taking the next step for the Uzumaki clan and become one of the five? Yuriko froze for a moment and sunk into contemplation. On the side, Gensuke shook his head, Great Elder, we. Nanako shook him gently, Gensuke, Sensei asked Yuriko. Yuriko raised her head, Sensei, forget it, the Uzumaki clan is not suitable for the establishment of such a village, and we're not qualified when it comes to strength. Why not, don't we have the Great Elder? Gensuke intervened again. Masahiko shook his head, I'm not afraid of external threats. I'm worried about the problems from the inside. The embarrassing thing about the Uzumaki clan is that they are not strong or weak. They're not strong enough to turn their clan into a big village, but also not weak to be an ordinary clan in a village. This is what caused problems before when they were in Konoha. Besides, I'm not invincible. Masahiko sighed and remembered Madara, who's probably preparing his big plan, and the 6 paths observing the world. With his current level, without opening the 8th gate, he should be weaker than Madara, and if he opens it, he should be slightly stronger, thus, victory won't necessarily belong to him. Although Madara is now older, he should have become stronger with the Rinnegan. Sensei, is there someone stronger than you? On the side, Kanikiro wondered. Masahiko smiled, the shinobi world is vast, and no one knows what is hidden. However, although we can't become one of the 5 major villages, we can control one of the 5. Masahiko smiled, causing some dull expressions. Control? Gensuke's eyes slowly brightened, he obviously liked what he just heard. The daimyo Land of Thunder should be very anxious right now. Masahiko kept his smile and said, we can charge him a protection fee, let's say, 70% of their annual income. Everyone looked at each other and nodded in agreement, this was indeed a good idea. In the next few days, Masahiko personally flew to the Land of Thunder, while Yuriko and the other were still busy dealing with Kirigakure. However, something unexpected happened. At the daimyo's palace, he saw someone there, who should be dead, the Hatch Ibis Jinchuriki. So you actually survived? Did you use a tentacle clone? Masahiko reacted the moment he saw him. B in the original used the same trick. His appearance alerted the entire palace, and someone shouted, protect the daimyo. Uzumaki Masahiko, are you really that eager to kill me? Masahiko smiled, relax, I'm not crazy. Although you didn't die, I won't chase you to the daimyo's palace to kill you. I'm actually here to talk to the daimyo. Strong ninja from the Uzumaki clan, what do you want from me? The daimyo was very sturdy, he didn't show any disrespect to Masahiko, the man who has almost destroyed Kumigakure. I'm here to collect the protection fees. Masahiko said, your lands must be in need of protection, right? Protection? The daimyo was stunned, what kind of protection can you provide? Saying this proved his lack of confidence. Well, mostly to protect you from the aggression of the Uzumaki clan. You just need to pay 70% of your annual income. Are you kidding me? The daimyo yelled. Masahiko nodded, yes, it's a joke. Because next month, this palace will belong to the land of the whirlpool. The daimyo got startled, then looked at the bee, who closed his eyes helplessly. After this battle, the Hakusabi within his body became willing to communicate with him. And he clearly verified that Masahiko's strength was no worse than the god of the shinobi, Senjo Hashirama, which is the kind of power that Kumigakure cannot overcome. Eventually, Masahiko and the daimyo signed a verbal agreement, then he returned with full loads. Chapter 135, The Hero of Konoha. Fuinjutsu, Tail Releasing Method. Fuinjutsu, Sealing Chains. Word seal, sleep. In the north of the land of the whirlpool, Masahiko continuously used sealing techniques, and the newly resurrected Nibi got easily caught by him. Masahiko sensed the distance, then smiled. Kumigakure still has time to think about the Nibi? Well, sorry, I can't leave it to you. Sensing some spies in the distance, Masahiko turned around, then brought the Nibi, who had lost consciousness, back to the Uzumaki clan. More than a year has passed since that last war. The land of Whirlpool has received a lot of materials since then and started rapid development. Things are really going our way. It's a pity that Yuna is not here. Otherwise, it would have been time for the Industrial Revolution in the land of Whirlpool. Masahiko never knew how huge a country's 70% income is. He had originally decided that if he felt it was not the right amount, he will just ask for more. However, he never expected that the materials delivered by the daimyo would surprise him. If we compared the annual income of the land of Whirlpool with Konoha, it would be about 1.5% and about 15% compared with the land of Thunder. The land of Fire is really the richest, huh? Man, Tobirama and I were fooled by that greedy fire daimyo. The funds he was sending for Konoha were too little. Masahiko shook his head bitterly. Besides, the land of the Whirlpool has gained a lot from Kirigakure. In order to redeem those war prisoners, the daimyo of the land of Water needed to help Kirigakure a lot. They even agreed, when the land of Whirlpool doubled the price, to sign a non-aggressive treaty. Obviously, they heard about the tragedy of Kumigakure. With this, Masahiko accepted. He hadn't really thought of trivia things like revenge. The Uzumaki clan has already gained a lot from this war. Moreover, after reaching an agreement with the land of Water, Masahiko received another systemic message, completely changing the main story of Naruto World, the destroy of the Uzumaki clan. Obtained 100 witness points. At this point, his 490 witness points, which is enough to upgrade any attribute to the 9LV, but he wasn't in a hurry. He was afraid that a sudden strengthening will make the 6 paths impatiently appear. Sensei, you are back. When he heard Kanikiro shout, Masahiko found out that he already reached the Uzumaki village main gate. Masahiko dropped the cat with one hand, making the ground tremble. However, it was asleep, and even when it hit the ground, it didn't wake. It is estimated that it will stay asleep for a few days. Sensei, what are we gonna do about it? Yuriko stepped forward and asked. Masahiko hesitated for a moment. You handle it. Masahiko has no plans to become a Jinchuriki, and even if he wants to be one, he will also choose the Kyuubi. As for gathering the 9 Baijuyu, and become the Juubist Jinchuuriki, he didn't want to take such a risk. After all, he already believes that all the attributes at LV9 will also grant him Kekki Imora, which isn't worse than being the Juubist Jinchuuriki. On the side, Yuriko froze for a moment. Sensei, do we need to look for a suitable Jinchuuriki? Masahiko was stunned. No. People should voluntarily do such a thing. And if you want it for yourself, then ask Nanako personally to seal it. You don't want it to rampage, it will cause a lot of troubles. Yuriko nodded. I know. After instructing several clansmen to drag the Nibi away, Nanako made sure to reinforce the seal. Masahiko looked at the clansmen looking busy and said, there shouldn't be any problems for a short time. I will go to Konoha. Hiruzen kept sending a letter after another, asking for help. I want to see this so-called critical situation. Masahiko said while laughing. Through slugs, he could get in touch with Tsunade at any time. She kind of became Konoha's little traitor and told Masahiko about everything. Although Konoha is being besieged at the same time by the Sungakure, Iwagakure and Omegakure, it wasn't at a disadvantage. Konoha was actually winning the war. In the original, Konoha was also besieged in the same way, but in the end, it also won. Konoha now is stronger, and they also have Takigaku there to help them. Then why are they constantly asking for the Uzumaki to help? Masahiko laughed deep inside. In fact, at this point in the original, the Uzumaki clan should be already destroyed, and of course, they couldn't ask for Konoha's help. However, the Uzumaki clan won this time. It seems that Konoha wanted us to refuse to help us, so we cannot ask them for help. Hiruzen wouldn't have thought of something like this on his own. It seems that this is Danzo's deeds, huh? Masahiko shook his head, then flew toward Konoha. Within 1 hour, Masahiko reached Konoha. He wanted to fly directly to Hokage building, but Masahiko hesitated. If you go directly, Hiruzen will definitely pretend to be miserable for me, right? Maybe I should use the transformation technique to look like Danzo. Masahiko used a hand sign, changed his appearance to Danzo, then quickly moved toward Konoha. To the best of his knowledge, Danzo should be fighting Tsunagaku in the western part of the Land of Fire. When he reached the gate, the two ninjas stopped him. Danzo-sama, why did you come back? The two looked alerted. Masahiko didn't think much. I have something important to tell the third Hokage. They looked at each other, then one of them flashed away, saying, I'm going to report to the Hokage. The other said, Danzo-sama, I will take you there. Masahiko's expression stiffened. Clearly, there was something wrong. Why would the two gatekeepers leave at the same time? And why would they need to report directly to Hiruzen? However, Masahiko didn't say much. He wanted to see what loopholes his 10LV transformation has. Masahiko followed the gatekeeper and stepped forward. The moment the villagers saw him, they were stunned and walked away quickly. Man, he's so unpopular and he wants to be a Hokage. When they reached the Hokage building, Masahiko got startled. Dozens of Umbu suddenly appeared at the same time and surrounded him. While Hiruzen stood firmly in front wearing his combat suit. Who are you? And why are you pretending to be one of Konoha's elder? Masahiko was stunned. He couldn't believe that his 10LV transformation was this clear to see through. How dare you transform into the appearance of our hero, Danzo-sama? The ninja, who led the way, said, then punched him the chest. Masahiko still hadn't figured out the situation yet, but he couldn't help but ask after he sent the ninja flying with his repulsive force. Danzo is the hero of Konoha? Hiruzen raised his brows at that moment. This ninjutsu was so familiar. Elder Masahiko? Ah, it's me. Masahiko released the transformation. What the hell is he talking about just now? Hiruzen smiled bitterly, waved his hand, then the Umbus quickly left. Elder Masahiko, please follow me. Masahiko followed with curiosity. They turned around twice, then came to Konoha Hospital, and entered a special ward. The person lying there on the bed made Masahiko stunned slightly. Danzo's eyes were closed, while the entire right side of his body was wrapped in bandages, even his eye. He basically looked the same way he did in the original. No wonder I was easily exposed. How did he have hurt? Masahiko asked. Hiruzen sighed. It was done by the second Kazekage, but got beheaded by Danzo in the end. However, his injury is very serious. Can you help, elder? Masahiko was stunned. It seems that all the doubts he had about Konoha were false, so he turned out to be Konoha's here, huh? Let me take a look. Chapter 136, The Critical Situation. Masahiko carefully inspected Danzo's injury and frowned slightly. Who took care of his wounds? He's already treated, I can't do anything else. Masahiko wasn't good at medical ninjutsu, but he picked up some things after so many years. He could level it up, but with the Katsuyu, it wasn't necessary. It was Yuditen. Hiruzen responded. Yuditen? Masahiko was shocked, and the face of an old lady with a cold dead expression flashed in his memory. I didn't expect her medical ninjutsu to be this good. Masahiko sighed, then shook his head, asked Tsunade to come and see him. She will help him heal quicker. Although she's only 21 years old, Tsunade gradually gained the title, Princess of the Slug. She has rescued and healed the wounded in every battlefield and became trusted by everyone in Konoha. However, Danzo was seriously injured. His right eye should be already blind. The injury on the right side of his body will also cause him a permanent decline in his strength. I'm afraid he has no hope in training his wind release to LV8. Although Masahiko said that he should ask Tsunade to help him, he actually believed that these wounds cannot be treated. Hiruzen shook his head, the situation in Omegakure is critical, and Tsunade can't come back. Masahiko sighed, here we go again. Masahiko smiled then said, how critical is the situation? When he saw Masahiko's expression, Hiruzen was slightly stunned. However, he kept the act and said, Danzo is injured. I had to send Kagami to lead the team in Tsunagakure. In Omegakure, only Orochimaru was experienced enough to lead. Yet the situation is so critical, and the villager leader, Hanzo, didn't make his move yet. Masahiko frowned, you sent Kagami to Tsunagakure because of Danzo's injury? Masahiko didn't know about this. Hiruzen suddenly stupefied, no, Danzo got injured, but the second hokage died in the battle. Sakumo is also over there. Sarutobi shook his head helplessly, however, after they have selected the third hokage, the battle will become fiercer. I can't rest assured with only Sakumo over there. Masahiko hesitated. Noticing that, Sarutobi secretly rejoiced. Also, the situation at Iwagakure's side is a bit unfavorable to us. Although there are the Senju and the Hyaga, none of them could handle the dust release. After all, the dust release is such a strong ninjutsu, I'm sure you know that. Hiruzen said, then patted Masahiko's shoulder. But when it came to this, Masahiko no longer hesitated. Everything Hiruzen mentioned was to exaggerate the disadvantage of Konoha. If that was the case, Konoha would have been defeated in the original. If that is the case, why don't you go to the battlefield personally? Masahiko said with a smile. Hiruzen's face stiffened, Elder Masahiko, I still have to stay in Konoha to prevent others from attacking our village. Masahiko smiled, it's okay, I'll stay in Konoha for a while, you go. One day later, Masahiko sent Hiruzen to the battlefield, and the life of the substitute hokage started again. The first thing he has done as the substitute hokage is to issue the arrangement of the new graduates of the Ninja Academy, whether to transport them to various sides of the battlefield or to distribute them to the various departments that lacked people in Konoha. It must all be decided by Masahiko, however, he was willing also to respect the wishes of the kids. Uchiha Mikoto applied to help in Konoha Hospital. Masahiko looked at the file in his hand, feeling slightly stunned. Uchiha Mikoto has already graduated? Konoha Hospital. Masahiko stroked with his pen, a big check symbol. You will surely need those skills when your kid decides to kill you all. After flipping through a few documents, Masahiko felt stunned, none of them applied to the battlefield. This group of kids. Masahiko froze a little, he remembered that during the Third War in the original. After graduation, the Hokage sent them directly to the battlefield. Although he called it a critical situation, sure enough, Hiruzen thought this through, he really was trying to deceive me into helping. Masahiko smiled slightly. He was really amazed at how much he grew in such a short period. After reading through to the end, Masahiko finally found a person who applied to go the battlefield. Applying to go to the battlefield? Finally, one brave kid. Masahiko looked down to read the applicant's name, Senju Nawake. Masahiko yelled decisively, no. Masahiko still remembers how Nawake died in Omegakure on the battlefield after graduation. He might be thinking of finding his sister there, but Masahiko knew for sure that he's going to die. Nawake's talent can be regarded as high, but it's not really remarkable, and much worse than everyone's expectations. He is still 11 years old, and he has just graduated from the Ninja Academy, which is still worse than geniuses who graduated at the age of 7 and 8. Masahiko thought that after he disapproved, Nawake will just drop the idea, but unexpectedly, he came over to find him. Grandpa, why don't you let me go to the battlefield? Masahiko looked at the frustrated Nawake before him, and couldn't help but sigh helplessly. What will you do when you go to the battlefield? And does Mito know about this? Nawake shouted. Grandma agreed. She wouldn't if she knew. Masahiko whispered, you have just graduated, you lack strength and experience, just wait for your time. But I made an agreement with several classmates to go to the battlefield together. Nawake said. Masahiko was surprised, and couldn't help but feel sorry for him. He picked up a pile of documents on the table, then handed it to Nawake. The more he looked, the more Nawake seemed frustrated. They didn't apply, these cowards. Even Mikoto didn't apply either. Masahiko was stunned, he felt that something was wrong, but he didn't think much about it. I'm going to stay in Konoha for a while. Stay, and I will teach you some ninjutsu during this time. Although he still felt frustrated, Nanaki didn't oppose it, he nodded, then left. Masahiko breathed a sigh of relief, and suddenly he felt like he had missed the opportunity to gain some witness points. If I sent Nawaka to the battlefield, and followed him secretly, then saved him, I would have gained a lot of witness points. Masahiko pondered while shaking his head with a wry smile. Granting for witness points was really driving him crazy. If this is the case, I might as well kill Hiruzen, maybe I will get 500 points or even 1000 points from that. Maybe kill him with the sexy technique? He will definitely die by exsanguinations. While thinking about this, someone knocked on his door. Masahiko was stunned and slightly sensitive with a strange look on his face. It seems he was busted as soon as he wanted to do bad things. Come in. Danzo, who was dressed the same way he did in the original, walked in with a cane and greeted Masahiko. Masahiko smiled, welcome, the hero of Konoha. Danzo was silent for a while, Elder Masahiko, my body. Masahiko shook his head, I can't fix it, but you can. The expression on Danzo's face changed, then he pondered silently. Masahiko sighed, you're trying to hide it, but I can see it. Stop thinking about protecting the village from your allies. Especially the Senju and the Uchiha. Just heal your wounds and redeem your place. Danzo nodded and went out. I hope he can restrain his heart, and don't take the same road he did in the original, because if that happens, I will end up killing the hero of Konoha. Well, as long as I'm around, he wouldn't dare. Chapter 137, The Fortune Stick. Part 2 of Masahiko's substitute hokage career lasted only 1 month, then Hiruzen returned from the battlefield. However, he returned with a dark face. Hiruzen really looked annoyed. Masahiko greeted him with a smile, what's wrong? Who made you angry? Hiruzen sighed for a long time but didn't say much. Masahiko didn't ask, but later, he heard the news. Hiruzen left Konoha and went straight to the Land of Rain. He wanted to clear Megakure out of the image since it was the smallest village, but he didn't expect to be blocked completely. Hiruzen joined the battlefield, and so Hanzo, the leader of Megakure. Although Hiruzen had the upper hand against Hanzo, things didn't go to the direction the latter expected. Ibus Hanzo's summoning beast took advantage of this large-scale war, and even with Tsunade's dioxides, Konoha suffered a lot of casualties. After fighting with him several times, Hiruzen also found it hard to deal with Hanzo. In the end, Hiruzen couldn't help but reach a hold-fire agreement with Hanzo. Although the two of them knew what the situation was like, the world saw it differently. Everyone thought that Hanzo has repelled Hiruzen. As the leader of a small village, who repelled the hokage of the most powerful country among the 5 major villages in the shinobi world, Hanzo became famous all over the world and was regarded as a sort of a hero by the villages. The name Hanzo of the Salamander has even spread throughout the world. Hiruzen should be really pissed off. He went all the way to the battlefield to become Hanzo's stepping stone. Masahiko laughed out loud. Great-grandpa, I succeeded. Nawaki's shout came from the distance, and Masahiko looked at him with a smile. You've finally succeeded? It took you a month, though, but it's okay. During this time, Masahiko decided to teach Nawaka the Raise Non. Let me see it. Alright. Shadow Clone. The method that Nawaka used made Masahiko stunned. Raise Non. The Raise Non quickly took form, and Nawaka pressed it directly on the wall beside. Masahiko twitched his mouth, looking at the big hole in the wall and feeling a strange sense of familiarity. Nawaka, why did you hit the wall? Nawaka didn't care really, he was grinning, exposing his front teeth. But, who taught you to use the shadow clone to perform the Raise Non? Nawaka scratched his head, Great-grandpa, isn't this easier? Is that so? Masahiko sighed in his heart. No wonder Tsunade felt that Naruto was like Nawaka, the two had a similar way of thinking. Great-grandpa, can I go to the battlefield now? Nawaka learned a new trick, and he was obviously eager to try it again. So, you had another agreement with your friends? Masahiko smiled. Nawaka seemed embarrassed. No, I'm going alone. Masahiko shook his head, you still lack a lot of things. You need to sharpen your skills. Recently, Masahiko gradually thought of this a lot. Nawaka was killed by a paper bomb. This kind of thing won't be solved just by learning the Raise Non. Masahiko needed to teach him some combat experience. Nawaka was disappointed, how long will it take, great-grandpa? Masahiko said firmly, the battlefield isn't a game, you are still young. Noeki hesitated, but many of the 10-years-old kids have already gone to the battlefield, and I'm the grandson of Senjo Hashirama. Masahiko's expression eased down. It seems that the fact that he's the grandson of Senjo Hashirama among the Senjo clansmen has put a lot of pressure on him. The battlefield will indeed hone your skill, but I will guide you, so you won't miss anything. What you need now is the foundation, the very basics, not the actual combat. When the time is right, even if you don't want to go, I will force you to go. Noeki nodded, but how long will it take me to go to the battlefield, great-grandpa? A year, maybe 2. Noeki was stunned. So long, the war will be over by then, don't you think? It's better if it ends. Noeki murmured, then how can I make a contribution of its end while I'm here, how will I become the hokage? Masahiko felt shocked for a moment and remembered that Noeki's dream was to become the hokage. Why do you want to become the hokage? Noeki looked up, this village is a treasure left by Grandpa, and I want to protect it. A treasure left by Hashirama, huh? Masahiko nodded, then protecting this treasure requires strength. I will not be easy on you in the next training. Noeki nodded in agreement. Masahiko decided to stay in Konoha again. He practiced his gentle fist every day and trained Noeki. As for the Hyuga boys, the 2 kids have already joined the battlefield, which made Masahiko a little surprised. At this age, Hisashi should have already been deemed as a branch. But they still sent the 2 teenagers to the battlefield. What is the Hyuga clan doing? Masahiko didn't know that the Hyuga patriarch was struggling to decide who should be his successor. After all, the 2 were Masahiko's disciples. Therefore he simply sent the 2 of them to that battlefield and decided to choose based on their performance. The time has passed, and it was already September, the 30th year since the establishment of Konoha. When the Ninja Academy started again, Masahiko hurriedly went there early in the morning feeling that today is the day. Sure enough, among the children, his eyes caught the back of a teenager with golden hair, Namikaze Minato. Masahiko walked over with a smile and patted Minato's shoulder. Minato turned around in doubt, but also with a sunshine smile on his face. Grandpa, do you need something? He obviously didn't know Masahiko. Masahiko nodded, yes. Young man, I'm surprised to see that you have such a strong body, you will be a great shinobi in the future. I have a great cheat that you can call a ninjutsu for you. But I won't charge you any money, you can take it for free. Masahiko said, then took out a folded crumpled piece of paper from his sleeves and handed it to Minato. Remember, this is a cheat, and it must stay secret, you can't open it in front of anyone. Masahiko added. Minato seemed doubtful, but he couldn't just ignore him. Thank you, Grandpa. Masahiko nodded with a smile, you're really polite, good boy. He turned then and left. The admission ceremony continued, but Masahiko didn't pay any attention to it. Of course, he wouldn't record the Flying Thunder God technique on that paper. At this age, Minato couldn't learn it, so. Minato followed his new teacher in charge of his class, then met his new classmates, and listened to his teacher explaining the history of the shinobi world and some ninjutsu basic knowledge. But he somehow couldn't get rid of Masahiko's image, which was popping in his mind every time, reminding him of that secret ninjutsu that Masahiko has given him. Noticing that no one was paying attention to him after turning left and right, Minato secretly took out the cheat and opened it. You will grow to become a very talented ninja, but the name Namikaze Minato might give you a lot of troubles in the future. Boy, change your name. The excited expression on Minato's face stiffened. He looked at it several times, but he didn't see any ninjutsu. Is this some fortune stick? Minato seemed disappointed. Namikaze Minato over there, what was I saying just now? Minato got startled and stood up. I'm sorry, sensei, I've spaced out for a moment. Sit down and pay more attention. Therefore, on the first day of school, Minato gave his teacher the wrong impression of him. Chapter 138, Student Exchange Program. Exchange student? Sarutobi looked puzzled, and he looked like he didn't understand what it means. Masahiko nodded with a smile, yes. It's a student exchange system between 2 schools. The goal is for everyone to communicate and make progress in helping each other. This was the method that Masahiko came up with to reasonably be able to send Kushina to Konoha. After he finally found Minato, he began to think about it. In the end, he thought that this was the best way. Hiruzen kept quiet for a moment, that is to say, this student exchange system will be applied between Konoha Ninja Academy and the Uzumaki Ninja Academy? Yes, this will not only strengthen the relationship between Konoha and the Uzumaki but also will allow us to exchange advanced teaching methods with each other, Masahiko explained endlessly. Hiruzen seemed to be stunned for a long time, then he shook his head bitterly. Advanced teaching method? Obviously, the teaching methods of the Uzumaki clan are not that viable. Masahiko's face stiffened, then he hurriedly nodded, yes, I know. So which grades should we choose from? Masahiko hesitated, I think we should only choose one from each grade for trial. And we don't need to choose students who already graduating this year. Hiruzen sighed helplessly, then nodded in agreement, Elder Masahiko, I will need some time to pick a few. Masahiko nodded, then I will go back too and choose a few also, don't let Nawaka join the war. Although I've trained him a bit, he's still not ready yet. Hiruzen nodded, relax, Elder Masahiko, Master Mito will not agree too. Well, that's fine, I'll go back and pick the students then. Elder Masahiko, wait a minute. Hiruzen quickly stopped, looking flustered. Masahiko knew at a glance that he wanted to ask about Danzo's recent condition. He seems unstable but more emotionally than physically, but I think you already know about that. Hiruzen looked confused at that moment, then why didn't you try to stop him? Masahiko shook his head, he's the hero of Konoha now. I'm not in a hurry, as long as he doesn't try to harm the village, I'm fine with it. But I already warned him, if he dares to cause harm to the Senju, I will kill him personally. Masahiko hesitated for a moment, then added, the Uchiha too. Masahiko didn't wait for Hiruzen's reply and flew out directly to the Uzumaki village. The exchange student system was unexpectedly hindered by Nanako. Sensei, why are you sending Kushina to Konoha? Masahiko looked at Nanako dumbfoundedly. He was in a hurry to come up with the best plan to send Kushina to Konoha, but he didn't stop for a moment to think about Nanako's feelings or even consider Kushina's wishes. Masahiko's voice was so hesitant it sounded like he was stuttering, he really didn't know what to say. Nanako noticed that, and he suddenly calmed down. She knew that Masahiko will cause Kushina no harm. Sensei, do you think Kushina would be better off in Konoha than stay in the Uzumaki? Masahiko sighed, then explained, who knows what good for her or bad. But I think since we're doing this student exchange system, we should show our best side to Konoha. Ultimately, Masahiko chose such an explanation than telling the truth. In 4 or 5 years, Kushina will graduate and will come back to us. Konoha wouldn't send an exchange student from the Uzumaki to fight their battles. Nanako seemed hesitant but still didn't respond. Masahiko was also feeling helpless. If her grandma won't let her go, he wouldn't simply force Kushina to go. However, her silence was enough for him to carry on with his plan. Masahiko personally selected a talented student from each grade and prepared to send them to Konoha in the second semester. After the selection, Masahiko received a notice that Konoha has also sent the exchanged students list. The first student's name and information made Masahiko slightly happy. Sarutobi Shinosuke, 2nd grade. The third Hokage's elder son. Chakra nature, earth, fire. Note, this is Hiruzen's elder son, not Asuma, but Konohamaru's father, who has not been mentioned in the anime. The author chose the name Shinosuke for him, which also the name of the protagonist of Crayon Shin-chan. Now things are really working his way. This is a gift from heaven. Masahiko ran quickly to find Nanako, and he directly gave her the file. Look, Hiruzen sent his son over, so we have to show our sincerity too. Kushina needs to go. Nanako shook her head, smiling, alas, sensei. As she was peeking, Kushina rushed in. Grandpa, you're here. Masahiko nodded with a smile, Kushina, did you finish school already? Kushina is now a first-year student in the Uzumaki Academy. Kushina subconsciously shook her head, then she quickly nodded. Masahiko couldn't help but feel confused, it's only noon, why no one told me that school only takes half a day? Nanako next said helplessly, Kushina, you're skipping classes again. Kushina's face turned red, school is boring, and I've told you that I want to go to Konoha. Masahiko didn't expect Kushina to take the initiative to go to Konoha. Does she think that Konoha is a bit more lively? Nanako sighed, then said, okay, I will let you go, but you can't lose your temper in Konoha like you do here. Be careful, don't. This sentence was followed by all kinds of grandma's nagging, which Masahiko didn't pay any attention to. After a while, Nanako finally felt satisfied. Masahiko then smiled and said, "Why are you so hard on Kushina? Her character was exactly the same as you when you were a child. Don't you remember that time when you splashed that pot of water on me? Grandpa! You splashed a pot of water on Grandpa?" Kushina exclaimed. Nanako recalled and couldn't help but giggle. "Well, I didn't know a lot of things back then. But I'm old now, I have to take care of Kushina, I don't know how much of time is left for me." Masahiko was stunned. "Hey, don't talk like this, you're fine," he said, then quickly tried to shift this topic, which has started to feel heavy on his chest. "It's settled then, Kushina will be sent as an exchange student to Konoha." Nanako no longer objected, and Masahiko sent the exchange list to Konoha. Masahiko was relieved now that the plot finally got back on track. "I should really give a burnt offering to the gods," Masahiko scoffed as he was walking, then he took another glance at the exchange student list. First grade, exchange student, Namikaze Minato? Masahiko's face stiffened. Is this some kind of a joke? He finally managed to send Kushina to Konoha, and now Hiruzen is sending Minato to the Uzumaki. No god, not like this. 2 days later. In the Hokage building, Hiruzen was dealing with some affairs when suddenly an Umbu flashed in. "Hokage-sama, we have received a reply from the Uzumaki village regarding the exchange student list." Hiruzen raised his head. What did Elder Masahiko say? "He rejected one of the kids, first year, Namikaze Minato." Sarutobi was stunned. "Is there any problem with that kid?" The Umbu hesitated before he slowly spoke. Elder Masahiko replied with only 2 words. The Umbu stopped for a moment. "Girlish refused." Hiruzen's face stiffened. "As I thought, that kid is too blondie, hi." Chapter 140, The Legendary Sunin. Masahiko flew all the way to the Land of Rain. As the name implies, the Land of Rain is a country where it rains all year round. Its public security is also rigorous, making it very difficult to mix in. But for Masahiko, it's very easy. After all, most of the ninja villages don't have an air defense system, including a megakure. The raindrops were big. The moment it falls on Masahiko's head, it flows down directly on both sides of his body. Masahiko glanced down, and there were broken buildings everywhere. Obviously, the battle with Konoha made this already barren land even more deserted. Kagura's eyes. Masahiko used one hand sign and closed his eyes, sensing his surroundings. There. Masahiko narrowed his eyes, turned around, then flew toward the east. Along the way, a lot of Konoha shinobi were fleeing embarrassedly. The situation is not good. Although he said so, Masahiko actually didn't feel much urgency, since he knew the final result of this battle. He came here just to gain witness points and act only against the possibility of Hanzo getting the upper hand. Although it's unexpected how dared to offend Konoha and break the holding fire agreement, I still feel that things will be okay. Masahiko sighed, then fastened up his pace slightly. When he reached the battlefield, there was only Hanzo, then Legendary Sunin left. Masahiko didn't step forward. Watching the Legendary Sunin fighting Hanzo, he felt that this was their battle. They grew a lot in the past 2 years. After watching them for a while, Masahiko whispered. Although all the 3 of them have made a magnificent improvement, Hanzo, who could face Hiruzen, wasn't the kind of opponent they could beat currently. Fire Release, Exploding Flame Formation. Note: Fire Release, Exploding Flame Formation is a technique that was a specialty of Hanzo. Hanzo's technique left Masahiko slightly surprised. This technique is a bit interesting. Adding the fire chakra nature to the explosive tags enhances its explosive power. Masahiko pondered. He really lacks this kind of artful ninjutsu. The explosive tags appeared on the ground under Tsunade's feet, but Masahiko wasn't nervous. He was sure that Jiraiya will come to rescue. Ninja Art, Needle Jizo. Jiraiya's hair quickly changed into needles, then he wrapped it around his and Tsunade's body, blocking the bombardment of the explosive tags. Jiraiya. Tsunade was worried. Jiraiya quickly lifted the technique, shaking his head, then smiled, raising his thumb. No problem. Surely the hero successfully rescued the beauty's booty. Hiruzen didn't stop there and rushed toward them with the Kusarigama in his hand. Note: Kusarigama, sickle with a chain. It's Hanzo's personal weapon. Hidden Shadow Snake Hands. Orochimaru has also learned a series of snake control ninjutsu. Of course, the snake that appeared from his sleeves weren't actually hidden as the name of the technique claims, they were summoned snakes. The snakes directly bit Hanzo, but Masahiko in the distance was shaking his head. The moment he was bit, Hanzo turned into water, then appeared behind Orochimaru. Heavenly Foot of Pain. Tsunade appeared in time and forced Hanzo to retreat with one terrifying kick. The teamwork of these three was exceptional, and it has even made Masahiko nod with satisfaction. Teamwork and cooperation are very tacit. Otherwise, 3S wouldn't hold their ground more than 10 minutes against an S+. Masahiko didn't shoot, but he wouldn't just sit back and watch the three being beaten by Hanzo. He was waiting for an opportunity. This time, Hanzo was planning on taking them seriously. He fell back, then took off his mask and bit his finger, and summoned Ibus. The three also bit their finger and summoned their bests. At that moment, Masahiko mobilized a large amount of his chakra and channeled it into Tsunade's summoning seal on the ground. Instantly, the legendary Sunin's beasts appeared on the battlefield. The young version of Gamabuntat, the young version of Manda, and Tsunade's. Orochimaru, you bastard, how dare you summons me into this nasty place, Manda screamed. Orochimaru didn't pay attention to him, and looked at Tsunade aside, while his eyes flashing, Tsunade, your chakra volume has improved again. Tsunade was surprised for a moment, then looked at the slug under her feet while slightly stunned. Katsuya-sama, is this you? The slug under Tsunade's feet was 10 times the size of Manda and Gamabuntat. In the distance, Masahiko shook his head, it wasn't enough? I used 60% of my chakra only to summon 1/5 of the sage slug? The Katasuyu didn't answer Tsunade. She was swearing deep inside at Masahiko. She didn't want to help, but Masahiko begged her. Although she likes the wet environment, she actually hates this kind of rainy weather. Tsunade didn't ask again and excitedly said, all right. We can win this way. Obviously, when facing Hanzo, who could ace Hiruzen, Tsunade didn't believe they win before. Hey, Katsuyu. When Gamabunta was too young, he wasn't embracing the gangster's character yet, and politely greeted Katsuyu. As for the idea of having to jump on the slug sage during an fight, Jiraiya felt slightly disgusted. During this time, Hanzo didn't do anything. He could perceive that when Tsunade used the summoning technique, a huge amount of chakra was transmitted from the outside, and he was vigilantly looking around for the source. Body flicker technique. The sage slug obviously wanted to end this quickly. Without waiting for Tsunade's instructions, she took the initiative to spit out acid and stopped Hanzo's movements. Tsunade was surprised for a moment, and next to Orochimaru, she said, let's go. Noticing how serious the situation was, Manda obeyed Orochimaru's orders and besieged Hanzo together. At that time, Jiraiya's halt came to an end and also continued to fight. Masahiko, who was restoring his chakra in the distance, kept watching the battle. Although it's only 1/5 of the sage slug, I imagine it should be enough. But the battle was determined beyond his expectations, and Hanzo the Salamander proved that he was worthy of his demigod title. Water Release, Great Waterfall Technique. Water Release, Water Dragon Bullet Technique. Under the enhancement of the Land of Rain's environment, all the water release ninjutsu became extremely overwhelming, and while Hanzo kept sneaks attacking them from the underground, the battle between the two sides was evenly matched. With Katsuyu, their level combined is barely SS, it seems that the outcome is not yet determined. Masahiko wasn't planning on assisting anymore, but next time, if needed, he's gonna shout personally. After half an hour, Tsunade couldn't sustain keeping Katsuyu any longer, and had to be lifted. However, Hanzo also consumed a lot of his chakra. He's an opponent that can match Sensei, Tsunade said while gasping. Hanzo was also out of breath as he was frowning at the three. Tsunade's chakra was consumed a lot because of the slug sage, but Orochimaru and Jiraiya were in good condition. It estimated that if they carry on with the battle any longer, both sides will lose. And that huge chakra Hanzo sensed before made him more cautious. No need to fight anymore. Hanzo slowly put on the mask and lifted his summoning beast. Young shinobis, it's really impressive that you've managed to keep standing against me to this point. From today onwards, I, Hanzo, hereby name you the legendary Sunin of Konoha. There's no need to continue this war. The legendary Sunin looked at each other hesitantly, then nodded at each other. Mainly because even with Tsuan's extraordinarily move, they didn't have the upper hand, and it was very beneficial for Konoha to shake hands with such a worthy opponent. In the distance, Masahiko took a deep breath as the familiar Chinese characters flashed before him, witness and change the storyline of the Naruto World, the naming of the legendary Sunin. Reward 20, *5, witness points. 600. Chapter 141, The Truce Period. The Second Shinobi World War entered a sudden stagnated phase after a Megakuer temporarily withdrew its forces and signed a truce agreement. Compared to the original, a Megakuer was sieged by one lesser village, Konoha, thus, the other two temporarily held their fire in a tacit agreement. They needed to rearrange their cards and decide whether they still want to be hostile to Konoha, especially Megakuer, whose weakness cannot be concealed. If they didn't give most of their material to the Uzumaki for protection, Megakuer would have long abandoned the idea of attaching Konoha and focused on them. Masahiko helped the legendary Sunin in a Megakuer, and after getting his witness points, he flew straight back to Konoha and was ready to pay more attention to the feelings of Kushina and Minato. However, nothing was different than the original. Kushina isn't very cold to Minato. Masahiko wasn't in a hurry when the hero saves the beauty, everything after that will happen naturally. Wait a second, Masahiko seemed like he remembered something. It was the Megakuer who tried to kidnap Kushina in the original. Will they still dare to do so? Masahiko sighed for a long time, step by step. A loud noise suddenly came from the outside. The heroes who saved us are back. Cheers and cheers. So, they have come back? Masahiko sighed emotionally. In the last few days, two troops came back from the battlefields, namely, the legendary Sunin from a Megakuer, and the Senju clansmen facing a Megakuer. It's gonna get busy again. Masahiko adjusted his clothes and walked out. Not to greet those heroes, but to visit the hospital. Tsunade, Grandpa, be there for you. With the return of these troops to Konoha, the hospital will be full, and the medic ninjas are completely insufficient. Masahiko was too lazy to join, but after watching Tsunade run out of chakra after 5 straight days of work, collapse on the floor, then wake up again and continue treating injured people, he couldn't help but offer a hand. Great Grandpa, you're here. Tsunade smiled wearily. There's another wave, you go to rest. Grandpa will handle them. Tsunade shook her head, I'll wait and see if there are any serious injuries. Now, this is embarrassing. Masahiko's face stiffened. When it comes to medical ninjutsu, Masahiko was way behind compared to Tsunade. Mainly because this thing doesn't appear in his status bar, it's not an independent skill, and each attribute may have a little impact on it. If he wants to improve his medical ninjutsu, Masahiko can only be patient and accumulate slowly. Of course, talent is a major aspect, but his can only be said to be well, he will eventually improve. Sure enough, shortly afterward, the injured shinobi were sent to the hospital. On the streets, the villagers were still cheering for the return of the heroes. However, only a few people know what Konoha has paid for that victory. Masahiko greeted them, and as soon as he opened his perception ability, he knew the general condition of the several wounded people. It can be said that this is the only aspect where Masahiko has an advantage over Tsunade in medical ninjutsu. These simple treatments will do. This is also Kagami. Masahiko was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Uchiha Kagami, the commander-in-chief, to come to the hospital. Elder Masahiko, Kagami greeted him. Masahiko took his arm, then pulled his sleeve, revealing a large open wound. Sand and iron? Masahiko asked tentatively. Kagami nodded, it's the Kekii Genkai of the 3rd Kazekage. If he managed to wound you, then he has got a lot stronger since he came to participate in the Jonin exam. Masahiko wondered. Elder Kagami, I'll heal your wounds. Tsunade walked over then took Kagami with her. Masahiko continued to pick up the wounded, but the severe injuries were not that numerous compared to the first 2 waves. Is it because of the famous lethal poison of Tsunagakuer, that most of the injured has died, or is it because our forces had the upper hand? Masahiko wondered, and finally selected a few seriously injured ninjas and entrustment them to Tsunade. As for the others, he treated them with the slugs, and just wrapped them up. When they finally dealt with this wave, the sky was already dark, and the streets calmed down. Tsunade came out of the operation room, all sweaty, and with a little chakra inside her body. Masahiko smiled, "Go and rest, Sunan-sama." Tsunade smiled bitterly, "If it weren't for you at that time, maybe none of us would have come back." During this time, Tsunade figured out that Masahiko has helped them secretly. After all, she knew that she didn't have the required amount of chakra to summon the Sage Slug. After she said this, Tsunade left the hospital and went home to rest. Masahiko didn't go and walked toward a special ward. "Grandpa, you're here," did Tsunade go back to rest? The person, who was tightly wrapped up in the bed, was the Senjo Kenji, who returned from the battlefield of Iwagakure. Masahiko nodded, "Yes, she went back. I bet you've heard of the troops who came back from Sunagakure today. Uchiha Kagami only suffered a minor injury on his arm. But the Senjo Patriarch suffered such a serious injury. Shameful, huh?" Although his face was also wrapped up, Masahiko could clearly see that he was smiling bitterly. "Well, Kagami doesn't have a younger brother, who is 25 years old to look after." Masahiko shook his head with a smile. As far as he knows, Senjo Masahiro has done a lot of good performances, and he occasionally participated in major battlefields. So, he really forgot where he buried the exclusive tags? Wars are not always about power, and this is why every army has several kinds of divisions with different tasks. When Masahiro was still young, he joined the Surprise Attack Division, and a result, one of the kids' talent was revealed. He had a special way of using trap and hiding explosive tags that no one can find it. If you're not perceptual shinobi, you will differently stamp on one of these by mistake during the battle. Therefore, he caused a lot of trouble to Iwagakure's forces. After all, they've never dealt with people who could set traps like this. However, whoever you are, if you're not really careful, you will end up stamping on one of these. And when Konoha's forces were retreating, Kenji. "Grandpa, I've brought shame to my clan and my daughter," Kenji said. Masahiko shook his head, "It doesn't mean that you didn't won that battle. And you shouldn't feel ashamed, you should feel proud of your daughter, who has become so strong." Kenji nodded. "Okay, I'll leave now, you better rest," Masahiko said, stood up, then walked out of the room. At the door, Masahiko smiled and nodded at his wife, Mito, and Masahiro, who looked sad. When Masahiro saw Masahiko, he cheered up a little. "Grandpa, have you heard any news from Yuna?" Masahiko shook his head, "You better take good care of your elder brother, Trap Boy." Hexa was holding a food box in her hand, "It seems that they've come here to eat with him. Go in, I'll join you too." Masahiko remembered that he didn't have food at home. Chapter 142, The Three Single Dogs. "Sensei, Grandpa, see you later." With a happy face, Mato Dai, who was dressed up neatly, closed the door behind Masahiko and Kanichiro. At the door, Masahiko and Kanichiro looked at each other, then suddenly sighed in unison. After entering the truce, Konoha entered the wedding-prone segment. Although Konoha was an advantage on every battlefield, casualties cannot be avoided, so as soon as they signed the truce, making more people become Konoha's first priority. Masahiko received several wedding invitations. Basically, every clan, family, big or small, held a wedding or two, but all were ignored by him. Genuinely, Masahiko wasn't interested in weddings. But due to the curiosity in his heart of knowing the identity of Guy's mother, he accompanied Kanichiro to attend Dai's wedding. The wedding wasn't big, only Masahiko and Kanichiro were invited. But what disappointed Masahiko that Dai's wife was just an ordinary civilian girl. Not only that, but the two looked the same. "Kanichiro, even Dai find a wife for himself, why are you so ignorant?" Masahiko started. Kanichiro's bitter eyes made Masahiko feel a little impatient and thought that it was time to teach him a lesson about life. "Sensei, do I have a teacher's wife?" But Kanichiro punched back. Masahiko's face stiffened and immediately waved his hand, "You're too young, so you don't know. When I was young, females were all around me, but Sensei's eyes were always aiming high, and didn't look down at them." Kanichiro didn't reply, but the scorn was evident in his eyes. Masahiko's face turned black, and just when he wanted to explain more, Nawaka came all swollen. Masahiko looked at him and laughed, "What? You've got beaten again?" Nawaka clenched his fist, and while gritting his teeth, he said, "If he wasn't 4 years older than me, I wouldn't have lost." "Great-grandpa, isn't there any way for me to surpass him quickly?" Masahiko smiled, shaking his head, "No, practice harder. The name of the person who beat Noeki was Uchiha Fugaku, the legendary father of Sasuke. The reason for beating him was easy to guess, it was Uchiha Mikoto, Sasuke's mother. As one of the Senju clan's heirs, Noeki had inherited Hashirama's feelings for the Uchiha and fell in love with Uchiha Mikoto. Masahiko was speechless when he heard of this, and he didn't know which side to stand on. In terms of feelings, he, of course, stands on Noeki's side, but he was afraid that Fugaku then will not give birth to Itachi and Sasuke. So for now, he decided to let it go naturally regardless of what's gonna happen to Sasuke and Itachi. Kenji also didn't seem like he minds this. After all, if this happens, and a girl from the Uchiha marry a Senju, their relationship will get stronger. But the Uchiha didn't like this, especially Fugaku, who beat Noeki several times during this period, just to win Mikoto's heart. Well, Masahiko didn't like that, but he was happy to see Noeki more serious. Noeki, do you want to train with me? Kanikiro clenched his fist as his spirit was set on fire. No, I'll do it myself. Noeki quickly ran away. Recently, because Dai was preparing for his wedding, Kanikiro was practicing solo, and he felt somewhat lonely. When Noeki was beaten before, he was tempted by Kanikiro. And after a day of training, he almost collapsed and decided to never go again. Watching Noeki walking away, Masahiko sighed, this kid always seems to suffer. Masahiko knew that he had saved his life, but he regretted not sending him to the battlefield under his supervision before. It would have helped to get him stronger. Time passed by quickly, the truce was in April, and it has already been 6 months since Konoha's Making People project started, and it has finally come to an end. What reassured Masahiko is that Sakumo has also married a wife, which isn't surprising. The Hatake clansmen were already a few people. And if Sakumo refused to get married, the elderly wouldn't agree. Yuna Masahiko muttered softly, that time, Yuna said that the short period is 1 year, and the long one is 5 years, but it has been more than 4 years, did something happen? Masahiko was very worried, as was Yuriko. During this time, he couldn't help but send several members of the Uzumaki patrol to look for her in secret. Of course, their famous red hair was eye-catching, and their transformation skill wasn't as good as Masahiko's level. Thus, when they're out, all the villages are alerted. However, the news of the Uzumaki defeating Kumagakure and killing its Raikage was still roaming in the world, and no one dares to provoke them. Thinking about it, if the whole world heard about this battle, then why is no one calling me the god of Shinobi? Masahiko was confused, it's better if they felt that the Uzumaki is unbeatable. He didn't want to think about it. But the news of his unreliable character has also spread throughout the entire world. Why would anyone call him the god of Shinobi? Come on! There are 300 more! Kanikiro shouted while supervising Noeki's training. Maybe because Mikoto's charm was infinite in Noeki's heart. But after he tried for several months on his own, he came to Kanikiro and asked him for special training, then he ended up regretting it. Greg great Gra grandpa, Noeki squeezed out these words, why I can't learn your taijutsu? Masahiko smiled, I'm a gentle fist user, and you're not from the Hyuga clan, how are you planning to learn it? You don't have the talent like me. Noeki was speechless. After more than an hour, the sky darkened, and the training was finally over, while poor Noeki was paralyzed on the ground. We will continue tomorrow. Kanikiro's words made Noeki wish death. Masahiko shook his head, no, Noeki will train alone tomorrow. We're going back, Kanikiro. Kanikiro was stunned, did something happen to the clan, sensei? Masahiko smiled, it's almost the new year, let's go back to prepare for the celebration. New year? Kanikiro looked dull, isn't after 2 months? I'm planning for a big event this year, we're gonna prepare in advance. Is it another mask festival? Kanikiro seemed uninterested. No, it's a formal celebration, held for me. Kanikiro got startled, so Masahiko explained, next year, sensei will be 100 years old. He said, then sighed a little bit, he has been in this world for almost 100 years. Really? Great-grandpa? Out of curiosity, Noeki stood up on his feet. It seems that Hashirama's heart for the Uchiha is not the only thing he inherited. Why are you so surprised? Masahiko shook his head, helplessly, your grandpa, Mito, is 66 years old, and she calls me second grandpa. Sensei Kanikiro gasped, you've been single for 100 years. Masahiko's face stiffened. Shut up. No way. Naoki's eyes widened. Masahiko sighed in his heart, it's actually 124 years. Masahiko was so low, and glanced at the two of them again, we're all single dogs here, don't laugh at each other. The sad atmosphere filled Konoha's entire training ground. Chapter 143, The Centennial Banquet and the Fear. The new year is near, and the land of the whirlpool was as lively as ever. People always had a rough guess about Uzumaki Masahiko's age, and the Uzumaki village announced that they're holding his centenary birthday feast, which caused an uproar in the world of shinobi. The Warring States period ended 30 years ago, and at the time, it was claimed that average life expectancy is 30 years old. It would be great if you lived to the age of 60, and a miracle that will shock others to live for 70 years. Although the era has ended, no one has ever heard of someone who lived for more than 80 years. Masahiko wasn't worried about people figuring out the secret of his long lifespan. With his strength, no one will dare to come after that, except of course for Madara, and Mito, who causes him troubles from time to time, but obviously, she wouldn't cause him any harm. In recent days, envoys from every country have arrived one after another, even the Land of Thunder's daimyo came over in person. Of this year, he came to understand how weak Kumagakure has become, and it's a good thing to pay the Uzumaki for protection, at least this will keep the other villages away since the Hachibus Jinchuriki was barely stable. Masahiko walked around with the visitors, wondering how many people were expecting him to die soon. Too bad that won't happen. Thinking of this, Masahiko laughed. On January the 1st, Konoha's 32nd, Masahiko's centennial banquet was held as scheduled. There were many visitors. In addition to the Thunder's daimyo, the more heavyweight characters were Hiruzen, Mito, Cho, and several other village leaders, including Kakuzu. On the battlefield against Tsunagakure, Konoha hired Takigakure's forces to help them, and it did a lot. The war hatred was temporarily subsided in front of Masahiko, no one dared to hinder the harmony, and celebrated with him. Of course, people who don't know what to say in these kinds of events will always exist. Unexpectedly, Kusagakure's leader looked at Masahiko in the eye and wished him 100 years of life. With a wave from Masahiko, Kanikiro kicked him out. During the celebration, Masahiko stood up with a smile, during my life, I have held many birthday feasts. The next one will be my 150th birthday. At the time, I will invite you all, and I hope you can come and celebrate again with me. This sentence shocked everyone, only Mito shook her head with a smile, which made Masahiko speechless. I will be there, Kakuzu said. It seems he was confident in his methods of alternative eternal life. Masahiko was only joking, he didn't expect anyone to respond. He nodded, I hope you can live to that time. Afterward, the banquet began, and Masahiko was no longer interested in speaking. The age on the status bar has become 47 years old, exactly the same age he discovered the secret of his system. More than 50 years passed, it seems as if he was reincarnated again. In addition to his enhanced strength, he seemed to have done a lot, but also to have done nothing. In his mind, Masahiko's memory for the first 48 years he lived here has become blurry. He can't even remember the faces of his father and brothers anymore. However, the following 52 years were colorful, the extinguishing of the Kagaya clan, destroying the Shikifujin, establishing Konoha, witnessing the Battle of the Valley of the End, saving Tobirama, saving Kagami. So, I still did a lot of things after all, Masahiko sighed emotionally. The celebration went smoothly, and the visitors finally returned back to their countries, while some of the Uzumaki clansmen stayed to clean up the place. Masahiko remembered something and called Yuriko for clarification. Yuriko, is there a child named Nagato that was born in the past 2 years? Yuriko froze for a moment, I don't know, are you looking for him? Masahiko lied, when I was in Mount Miyaboku, the great sage Toad had a prophecy. He said that a genius will be born in our village, called Uzumaki Nagato, and I'm going to personally guide him. Is that so? I'll check. Yuriko responded with excitement. 2 days later, the news shocked Masahiko. How could this be? Wait, is it because of me Nagato wasn't born? No, maybe he was born by other clansmen outside of the village? Wait, we don't have clansmen outside of the village. Masahiko's expression suddenly changed, no way. Sensei, what's wrong? Maybe I just didn't find him, or maybe he isn't born yet. Yuriko looked strangely at him. Masahiko hesitated for a moment, then he looked at Yuriko in the eyes. I can't help but think that if he's so talented, he should be a descendant of you, Yuriko. I should find Yuna and bring her back. Yuriko froze for a moment, then immediately reacted, Sensei, Nagato, will not be. Masahiko nodded, then flew to the sky, landed again at the Uzumaki's armory room, and took the chakra shield bracelet left by Yuna, thinking it might be useful. After wearing it, Masahiko went straight to the Land of Rain. It's rare for the Land of Rain not to rain, and many shinobis were undergoing post-war reconstruction. Masahiko looked for those houses, which were still intact, and checked them door to door. Hiding his chakra, Masahiko avoided all patrol ninja and roamed in the civilian area several times. No? Am I wrong? Masahiko looked dumbfounded. That girl didn't end up living as wench in a slum, right? Masahiko continued to sear, and after half an hour, he finally took a breath of relief. So they were here, huh? Her husband is just a civilian? She didn't agree to marry Sakumo and choose a civilian instead. Why do geniuses always have to act weird? I originally wanted you to give birth to Kakashi, but you gave me Nagato. However, the moment he saw little Nagato, Masahiko started feeling anxious. No wonder he didn't show up in the Second World War, he was watching Nagato the entire time. Masahiko frowned, this Zetsu, I won't feel relaxed until he's dealt with. Masahiko gritted his teeth, then finally made up his mind. I don't care if the plot collapses, this thing must be solved. If I don't take my chance now, I'll regret it in a few years. And who knows, maybe Black Zetsu secretly has plans for me too. It has nothing to do with Yuna. It just happened that the opportunity has come now. Masahiko made up his mind, he still hesitated a bit, but didn't go to meet Yuna directly. Masahiko took 3 special shurikens that he didn't use in a long time out of his sleeves. When he got stronger, he rarely used any of these skillful things, but now seemed to be the right time. He placed then the 3 around Yuna's house, forming a triangle on the ground. Masahiko flew to the sky, then opened his perception to its maximum range. Since I'm wearing this bracelet, Black Zetsu can't perceive me. I can't perceive him probably, but these shurikens will help me react on time. As long as he dares to appear, I will kill him. Masahiko murmured while closing his eyes in concentration. As for the 6 paths, well, what happens will happen. Chapter 144, Black's Jinchuriki. After making up his mind on killing Black Zetsu, Masahiko decided not to show up in front of Yuna and hid in a place near her house. In the original, I remember that Black Zetsu was sealed in the end along with Kaguya. Masahiko hesitated, even Naruto and Sasuke couldn't kill him and had to seal him, I don't believe I can do better. Seal? Masahiko whispered, well, it won't be stronger than the 6-path seal, but... After pondering for a long time, Masahiko gritted his teeth, and... Sealing technique LV9, 500000/10000000. He directly used 400 points of the 600 witness points that it took him so long to save to increase his sealing technique to LV9. Now, I will need a seals container. Masahiko took out the jar with the sealed kyuubi out of his sleeves. However, while preparing to seal the kyuubi inside him, Masahiko felt that it was a little wrong. This jar could only seal half of the kyuubi, I don't think it will be enough to seal the will of a god. Masahiko hesitated for a long time, then looked at his belly and sighed. Ah, god damn it! Masahiko sent a clone to Yuriko and informed her that he had encountered some special circumstances, and he wouldn't come back until he solves it, even if it will take the rest of his life. Masahiko didn't just wait. He observed Yuna's family to be more precise, he watched Yuna's husband. He didn't want to believe it, but Yuna was arrogant enough to just marry an ordinary civilian. However, as time passed by, he learned more information. Yuna's family didn't work in agriculture. In fact, they couldn't even if they wanted due to the rainy weather. Most of the civilians here rely on vendors to sell or do odd jobs. There are many types of good jobs, the most popular is the blacksmith, after all, the Land of Rain has a high demand for weapons. On the contrary, Yuna's husband was a carpenter, and his craft is very good. However, Masahiko couldn't see anything special in him. Maybe she married him so they can work together on her projects? Masahiko handled this matter with a lot of patience. From January, he waited for a long time until October came, and on a cold night, he finally sensed some unusual fluctuations underground. Is it him? Masahiko was excited. However, he couldn't be so sure, so he waited a little longer. Masahiko didn't think he could beat Black Zetsu underground or move faster than him, so he waited for a suitable opportunity. The opportunity soon came. Masahiko thought that Black Zetsu was only intermittently observing Nagato's growth. But when it was quiet at night, Black Zetsu actually sneaked his head out and approached Nagato. Opportunity. Sage Mode Kai. Multiple shadow clones. Masahiko shouted in his heart, Bansho Tenin. The land of rain, which was originally asleep, woke up terrified that night as Masahiko used his full strength as soon as he saw a chance. The nearby houses couldn't bear the gravity, and all of them crumbled. At the same time, 3 clones teleported using the special shurikens and rescued Yuna's family. As for other accidents, Masahiko could only feel sorry. Uzumaki Masahiko, you bastard! Black Zetsu, who was quickly drawn by gravity, panicked. Grandpa, how did you find me? Yuna, who woke up from her sleep, seemed confused as she watched Masahiko's clones carrying her husband and son. I'm optimistic about your kid's fate, Masahiko said, then lifted all of the clones. Yuna also noticed the black weirdo stalemated with Masahiko's body and quickly pulled her blank husband and ignorant little Nagato to the side. Uzumaki Masahiko, something about you is really weird, it seems as if you were waiting for me here, Black Zetsu said hoarsely. Masahiko's all-out Bansho Tenin actually stagnated Black's movements. Who dared to attack our land? Several shouts came, as the Omegakure's guard hurried over. Masahiko got slightly distracted, and Zetsu took that opportunity to dig into the ground. Damn it! Masahiko cursed, looking at the shinobis surrounding him, he shouted, this is on you. 7th Gate, Gate of Shock, Kai. Chibaku Tensei. Masahiko flew into the sky, folded his hands together, and mobilized all of his chakra, creating a great gravity force. The ground cracked and trembled as numerous blocks and rocks of various sizes were pulling out by that attractive force, forming a colossal round boulder in the sky. Masahiko pushed himself to the limit to finally clear the layers of grounds above Black Zetsu before finally exposing him. Come here, you little! Masahiko's complexion turned red as he mobilized most of the gravity at Black Zetsu. As for the shinobi who surrounded him before, they got all piled into the huge sphere, but Masahiko had no time to care about them. Grandpa Masahiko! A cry of exclamation came, tightening Masahiko's heart as he saw Yuna barely keeping her husband and son on the ground. Hey, hey, hey! Masahiko shouted while blood was running out of his nose. It was really exhausting, but he managed to push them out of the gravity field. Black Zetsu couldn't escape Masahiko's star and was pulled inside of the sphere, but he kept drilling out to the surface as Masahiko kept piling rocks and block over him to keep him inside. The slums side of Omegakure accounted for a quarter of the country, and now it has completely disappeared. Masahiko didn't know how many civilians were injured by mistake, but he could only be sorry. Masahiko looked sullen as he watched Black Zetsu still struggling non-stop. Adamantine sealing chains. The golden chakra chains emerged out of Masahiko's body and instantly locked Black Zetsu inside the sphere. Senjutsu, dust release, detachment of the primitive world technique. The dust release hit hard the star covering the sky and shattered it from the middle. Black Zetsu was directly hit by it, but he was still fully intact. This was the first time the dust release fails. Uzumaki Masahiko, you can't kill me. Black Zetsu looked no more in panic and felt like Masahiko couldn't do anything to harm him. Masahiko smiled, is it because you're Kagaya's wool? Sure enough, it isn't easy to kill you. Black Zetsu's relaxed expression suddenly changed, and the smile on his face gradually was wiped. Well, if I can't kill you, then Masahiko sighed, 64 trigram sealing style. Note, A4 symbol seal is used to seal a large enemy or an evil spirit into a target, such as an object or a human's body. A stronger seal is created if 2 4 symbol seals are used, this is called the 8 trigram sealing style. In this case, Masahiko created a stronger version by using 16 4 symbol seal, which means 8 trigram sealing style. The LV9 sealing technique granted Masahiko the talent that his predecessors have never reached. In a flash, the 16 4 symbol seals were released by his combination, and with his right hand, he used a sealing sign targeting Black Zetsu in front of him. You're crazy. Black Zetsu knew what Masahiko was planning to do and shouted in panic. However, his cries changed nothing, and Black Zetsu instantly twisted and disappeared, then an abnormally complicated seal appeared on Masahiko's belly. Everyone else is just a Baijo's Jinchuriki, but from today on, the world should beware Uzumaki Masahiko, Black Zetsu's Jinchuriki. Chapter 145, Long Time No See. Masahiko needed to wait until everything is calm again, but how could he be calm? Masahiko's shooting display this time wiped out a quarter of the land of Rain off the map. After the seal was finished, Hanzo finally showed up, followed by several elite shinobi. You should be the great elder, Masahiko from the Uzumaki clan. Why did you come to my land? Hanzo was a cautious person, even when he could clearly see that Masahiko wasn't in a good state, he still didn't act recklessly. After all, if the rumors are true, Masahiko's strength could exceed that of the so-called demigod. After all, even he was surprised to see that star Masahiko has created covering the sky. Masahiko didn't respond. He was indeed in a bad state, but he was still fearless in the face of Hanzo and his clowns. Bad conditions can also be relative, and a Megakure can't put him in danger. Grandpa, are you okay? Yuriko and her family members rushed to Masahiko, then she asked. I'm okay. Masahiko, who was sitting on the ground, got up slowly. Even after using the 64 seal, Black Zetsu was still restless and kept fighting it inside. In the end, he was something related to Kaguya. Masahiko looked around, then glanced at Hanzo, who was in an alert. He then shook his head, smiling, I came to a Megakure to find one of my lost relatives. Now that I've found him, I should go. Masahiko said while pointing at Yuna in front of him. Hanzo-sama. One of Hanzo's men spoke. He obviously couldn't bear to see his leader being mocked by that old man, but he was intercepted by the latter. You've destroyed my country, and you expect me to believe such a claim? Even Hanzo couldn't keep his calm expression this time. Masahiko sighed, I would like to give you a reason, but if I said that I just defeated an enemy that would bring a disaster to our world, would you believe it? Hanzo took a deep breath, stared at Masahiko for a long time, and said, that battle a year and a half ago, it was you too. Masahiko smiled and didn't respond. Yuna, let's go. In the end, Hanzo didn't do anything. He wasn't sure how much strength Masahiko had left, and he could tell now that Masahiko has spared his life in that battle a year and a half ago. Masahiko took Yuna and her family back to the Uzumaki, but because they traveled with two ordinary people, the pace was slow. Yuna, can you tell me now what happened today? Yuna's husband finally asked. Yuna shook her head, hugged Nagato, and pointed to Masahiko, Hirakawa, I've told you before that I'm an Uzumaki, this is the great elder of our clan and my mother's sensei. As for what happened, I'm still confused. Grandpa Masahiko, what was that shadow? Masahiko stared at her, you're so kind to ask. Yuna wasn't afraid, and stared back, oh don't start this. I would have even stayed if you didn't just keep forcing me on that white-haired boy. Masahiko sighed deeply, you could just say no. Yuna said furiously, I did. Fine. Masahiko sighed again, that thing you've called a shadow, is Black Zetsu, and he was going after your son, Nagato. Nagato glanced slightly behind Yuna's back at Masahiko with a curious look. Yuna hugged him tighter, why? If he's after the Uzumaki clan, it should be me. Masahiko pouted, you really regard your talent highly. Indeed, you and your mother were the most talented clansmen before, but you're far behind when it comes to your son. Yuna was stunned for a moment then looked overjoyed. Masahiko then went on to say, Nagato possesses the ability to be the first clansman of the Uzumaki to achieve the sage body, something only Senju Hashirama have achieved before. You mean that Nagato might become a shinobi like the legendary first hokage? Masahiko hesitated, then nodded. Although Nagato isn't Asura's reincarnate, Masahiko felt that if he was raised from an early age, he might really grow to a level close to Hashirama. Yuna leaned forward and kissed Nagato's forehead, then asked, you haven't told me what exactly that shadow is? Masahiko shook his head and no longer explained. Leading the three slowly, they finally reached the land of whirlpools. Yuna, you still have to think of a way to explain all of this to your mom. I won't go with you because I have something to deal with, but don't run away again, you can't keep hiding Nagato forever, wait for me to come back, and I will guide him personally. Yuna looked at her husband, who was listening to them all the way. He looked like he knew already some of the truth in his heart. Yuna, take me to your mother. This kind of composure actually made Masahiko look a little bit surprised. It seems that Yuna at least married a real man. Masahiko waved his hand and flew again to the direction they came from. This time, the destination wasn't the land of rain, he was going to the land of fire, to a place called the Valley of the End. On the way, Masahiko took out a box from his sleeves. This was the only thing Black Zetsu was carrying, and it contained the Rinnegan eyes. Oh man, I'm feeling a great temptation, Masahiko sighed. No wonder Black Zetsu had to come out to the surface. He wanted to swap Nagato's eyes. This is the right time for me to go. Masahiko didn't plan to use the Rinnegan. They will cause him a certain burden, and his old man's body might not fully withstand its power. About half an hour later, Masahiko arrived at the Valley of the End, and the sculptures he created were still standing there. Masahiko knew long ago that Madara should be underground around here, but he never came to clarify for the plot's sake. But since he sealed Black Zetsu, he no longer cares about the plot and the future Fourth Shinobi World War. Now, after losing the Rinnegan, and without the assistance of Black Zetsu, Madara should be in a bad state now. Masahiko didn't feel that it was right to let an old friend die there alone in the dark, and decided to come to see him for the last time. Using his earth release, Masahiko sneaked deep into the ground. About 200 meters down, Masahiko entered Madara's huge underground palace. It's unexpectedly big. Masahiko's perception ability was fully on, and he could sense that familiar chakram more than 10 kilometers away near Kusagakuer. Is it that far away? Masahiko couldn't wait and fastened the pace. Black, you're back. Why did you bring my Rinnegan eyes back? What happened to Nagato? Madara's eyes were closed. And although he didn't have any perceptual abilities, he could still sense his own Rinnegan eyes. Masahiko held his laugh in with his hand as his eyes turned to looks like a fox eyes, then he imitated Zetsu's dark and hoarse voice, Madara-sama, the plan failed. Uzumaki Masahiko appeared there. He was too handsome for me to handle. Madara stood up, opened his eyes, and slowly activated his Sharingan. It turned out to be you, old man, and it seems that my will's manifestation has been destroyed. Masahiko smiled. Yup, it's me, Madara. I haven't seen you for a long time, but man, you look old. Chapter 146, The Choice. When Masahiko went to see Madara, he was ready to meet his thunder blows. But who knew that after he opened his Sharingan, he would turn, then slowly sat down again. Indeed, it's been a long time, old man. Masahiko was stunned for a moment, then he mobilized his gravity force, and a flat rock naturally emerged under his feet, and he also sat down, staring at Madara. Why did he sit down? Is it because he knows that he isn't my opponent in his current state? Madara, you've really fallen. You wouldn't be afraid of the enemy's power before. Masahiko looked sad. Madara's face was already covered with wrinkles, his hair was almost white, but the pumping veins in his forehead proved that he was still alive probably. It took a long time for Madara to speak. Old man, you really play dirty. Madara closed his eyes, but Masahiko didn't know what to say, he could only smile. Old man, Madara finally said, I have some questions that need your answers. Masahiko was startled, then he slowly nodded. Is the infinite Tsukuyomi really possible? Madara's question surprised Masahiko, but he found it reasonable. He believed that Black Zetsu's intervene in the Battle of the Valley of the End would definitely raise questions in Madara's hearts. But what surprised Masahiko is the fact that Madara asked him, as if he felt that Masahiko knew what infinite Tsukuyomi is. What is this infinite tsunami? Masahiko pretended to look puzzled. Old man, don't try to hide it. You seem to have known that Hashirama will die and that I will leave Konoha, and you have long known that I will attack the village. Madara slowly said, you can't hide anything from me. Yes, only an idiot like Hashirama won't notice. Masahiko. It has always been this way with Madara, you can't be too relaxed around him, even a calm expression will make him suspect. Is that really the case? Masahiko's silence was enough for Madara, so this time, you also knew that I would use that boy? Masahiko sighed. So this is where I've made a mistake, I should have killed you the first time I've met you, old man. Masahiko kept the smile, saying, this is just a coincidence, and you're the only one who's blamed for your dark life. I'm the one to be blamed, huh? Madara stood up and said, "So, you also knew about my Rinnegan? Which makes me assume that my entire plan was exposed." Masahiko's expression changed, and he couldn't help but smirk. "Madara, you're really clever. Between you and Hashirama, maybe you're the one who could create a truly peaceful and prosperous world." "True peace and prosperity," Madara whispered, "do you mean what was written in the infinite Tsukuyomi is wrong?" Masahiko hesitated, then shook his head, "It's true, but that isn't peace." After saying this sentence, Masahiko shifted the topic. "It has been 24 years, don't you want to know more about the Uchiha? Or do you already know through Black Zetsu?" "It has nothing to do with me." Madara sat down again. Masahiko reluctantly smiled bitterly. It seems that Madara has already learned about the Uchiha from Black, but he isn't good at expressing his inner feelings. Even if he didn't look like he cared, Madara really fought for the clan, he really wants good for them. Masahiko had no plans to do anything, and just like a tired old man, he closed his eyes and rested. It has been more than half an hour since he came here to meet Madara. He only focused on him, so he had no time to pay attention to his surroundings. The underground cave was vast. Masahiko entered the cave under the valley of the End, then ran to the southwest for more than 10 kilometers before finally finding Madara. If Masahiko's sense of direction isn't wrong, they should be near Kusagakur, and even closer to Kanabi Bridge. However, not far from Madara, there was a strange-looking stone statue, tens of meters high, with multiple round strong pillars emerging out of the shoulders. It was definitely the Gadumazo, which is the vessel of the Juobi. Looking around carefully, Masahiko glanced at Madara with a smile. "The environment is quite spacious, but it must have been hard to live so many years without sunlight. However, your skin hasn't turned white yet." Madara didn't respond. Masahiko paused, then said, "Your hope for resurrection is gone. Are you planning to spend the rest of your days here and die?" Madara opened his Sharingan again, looked deeply at Masahiko, then spoke again. "Another question, what is that black guy?" Masahiko smiled, "That's your will. Hashirama has the will of fire, and you have the will of darkness. One is red, and the other is black match as well." Madara frowned and stopped talking. "You can take your things back." Masahiko hesitated, took out the box with the Rinnegan, and threw it to Madara. Madara reached out and caught it with a smirk. "Old man, I thought you've lived all of these years by letting go of your courage." Masahiko shook his head, "I just don't want to miss the last chance to win against you. Without the Rinnegan you will be vulnerable, even if I win, it won't count." Madara clenched his right fist tightly, then he began to transplant the eyes. "Old man, you really play dirty," Madara repeated the opening speech again. Masahiko recalled, "I remember that we've fought 3 times, and I lost every time. The first one when I was 49 years old, and you were 17. The second, I was 62, and you were 30 years old. The third, I was 67, and you were 35. But now," Masahiko sighed, "I'm 100 years old, and you're 68 years old, do you think you still have the power to fight me?" Madara didn't answer. The power of the Rinnegan returned to him again, and his chakra was violently surging, his white hair turned black, and the wrinkles on his face slowly faded. 2 minutes later, a young version of Madara was in front of Masahiko. Masahiko felt shocked and thought, "So this is your answer, Madara," but he still smiled. "When we were in the Second Shinobi World War, you mocked me because you thought I've drained my vitality to fight you. I never expected you to do the same. Old man, don't blame me when I kill you." Madara didn't answer directly. "You think you can kill me?" Masahiko laughed, "I will just play with you one last time, and I hope you will be able to dance with me along the way." Chapter 147, The Fourth Battle Against Uchiha Madara. The Land of Fire was quiet, most of the lights were turned off as Konoha's citizens were sleeping through the night. An earth-shattering loud roar emitted, suddenly awakening everyone from their dreams. The third hokage, Hiruzen, heard this sound and quickly walked out of his house. "This is..." Hiruzen was surprised as he looked northwest. "Hiruzen!" 2 voices came at the same time as Danzo and Kagami rushed over to him. "Kagami, isn't this?" Kagami looked confused as he nodded. "According to the legends, yes, this should be the Susanoo of our great patriarch. Didn't he die by the hands of the first hokage?" Danzo asked urgently. Kagami lowered his head, he really didn't know the answer. Looking around, Hiruzen could notice that most of the people in the village walked out of their houses in shock. Danzo, Kagami, let's apply the emergency refuge plan first. The one who's fighting Uchiha Madara should be Elder Masahiko, and their battle might affect the village. Danzo and Kagami nodded, then started evacuating the civilians. The wind blew on the battlefield. Masahiko was flying in the air with a smile on his face as he was looking at the field. Will people rename this place after our battle? Madara's huge move of opening the complete Susanoo in this small area caused the landform to change. The underground cave got destroyed too. Madara, who was standing there proudly, then said, "Old man, it seems that you will be the last to witness my Susanoo as you were also the first." As soon as the two faced each other, Madara started performing unusually familiar hand signs. Would release secret technique, nativity of a world of trees. Masahiko, who was flying in the air, looked infested at the trees that were emerging from the ground. And within a few seconds, the valley turned into a forest. Hashirama Masahiko sighed emotionally while mobilizing his wind chakra nature to his feet, cutting off the giant growing trees that were coming after him. Facing Madara, Masahiko was obviously more cautious. Wood release, wood dragon technique. It was yet another familiar ninjutsu, which twisted Masahiko's heart. You keep using Hashirama technique to deal with me, Madara, you always intend to look down on me every time we fight. Masahiko opened the Sage mode, then performed a ninjutsu that hasn't been used for a long time. Senjutsu, wind release, Raisin Shuriken. The rotating shuriken instantly cut the wood dragon's head. But, the piercing buzzing sound gradually dissipated, as it was spinning against Madara's palm. Masahiko almost forgot that the Rinnegan had the ability to absorb chakra. Old man, it's not that I'm looking down on you. It's just that your weird techniques have no effect against these eyes. Masahiko smiled helplessly and said, Madara, you haven't seen me for such a long time, and it seems like you've forgotten that I'm a Taijutsu shinobi type. Madara seemed puzzled, he has never known or heard of this, but when he saw Masahiko quickly approaching, he scoffed, Humph, try your best. 2 minutes later, the ground trembled a few times, then Masahiko took a stance similar to Bruce Lee's pose screaming Wei, while Madara's face was completely turning dark. Come again. Madara shouted angrily then rushed over again. Fine by me. Masahiko replied excitedly. However, 2 minutes later, it was Masahiko who got embarrassed. Madara, what about playing fairly here? This taijutsu confrontation between the two turned out to be Masahiko against 5, Madara and his 4 limbos. Masahiko knew that this was a unique technique that belongs to his Rinnegan eyes, and since he had the 2 transplanted, he could use 4 shadows. Masahiko didn't receive the 6 paths chakra, and he couldn't sense these 4 shadows, but his high yang release, coupled with his Kagura's eyes, gave him the ability to feel them a little bit. 5th gate, Kai. Opening the 5th gate allowed Masahiko to retrieve the situation again. It's ridiculous to say that the strongest 2 shinobi alive didn't use any earth-shattering ninjutsu yet, but only their fists. In the middle of the chaos and after a long confrontation, the 2 breathlessly opened the distance again and looked at each other. They could see the smile in each other's eyes. After gasping twice, Madara was in action again, then said straightly, Old man, try not to die. Masahiko nodded without speaking. A crazy amount of chakra rushed from Madara's body, then his complete Susanoo emerged again on the battlefield. In the end, he chose to fight Masahiko in his best state. 7th gate, Gate of Shock, Kai. The blue vapor waves burst out. Masahiko looked at the opposite side where a colossal blue giant as height as a mountain was looking down at him and suddenly felt that his final transformation wasn't cool enough. I went all the way to Kumagakure for the sake of this moment and forgot to ask for the lightning armor technique's secret. Well, let's try this first. Water release, great waterfall technique. Masahiko rarely used water release, even when he got his hands on a lot of its ninjutsu after the battle with Kirigakure. However, one of these techniques he studied a lot. The Great Waterfall technique is just an ordinary A-class ninjutsu, but under the vast chakra amount of Masahiko, it's much stronger than any other technique. Well, this is what I call a Great Waterfall. Masahiko nodded upon watching that terrifying waterfall that was hundreds of meters high and tens of meters wide falling on Madara's Susanoo. But a moment later, Masahiko flickered away terrified. The Susanoo's lightsaber did not only cleave the waterfall but also nearly cut Masahiko into two halves. Hey! Then what about this? Water release, great exploding water colliding wave. Masahiko mobilized a large amount of chakra filling the area with horrifying crushing waves submerging Madara's Susanoo completely. He felt that if he overwhelms Madara with this great amount of water, he would get the chance to attack him using his high speed. However, the condensed water got absorbed easily by Madara. Old man, why are you always using these weird techniques? You're weak. Masahiko dodged and avoided every slash of the Susanoo's swords while feeling speechless. These water releases are really useless, but he still replied with, I'm letting you take some of my chakra. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have beaten you 3 or 4 times by now. However, this time, I will be serious. Senjutsu, dust release, detachment of the primitive world technique. Masahiko's instant casting didn't leave for Madara much time to use a hand seal, so he decided to block it with Susanoo's sword. Facing the mightiest defense, Masahiko's dust release shouldn't have an advantage. Almost instantly, Masahiko's beam of light collided, and the shock wave completely wiped out the original forest. Masahiko was pushed hundreds of meters back by the impact while frowning and looking at Madara. The Susanoo's sword was completely shattered, but Madara quickly recovered it by consuming a little of his chakra. At the same time, Konoha has been successfully evacuated under Hiruzen's order. Then he gathered a group of elite shinobis, and was ready to go and aid if things went wrong. In his heart, if Madara wins, it will be a disaster for Konoha and the world. Chapter 148, Death. The landform has changed again. Even Masahiko didn't know what people will call the Konobi Bridge after this battle. Under the continuous blasts of both Masahiko and Madara, the landform kept getting destroyed and changing. Masahiko closed the 7th gate, while his body was covered with bruises. He was afraid that if he keeps it open any longer, he might lose his life. Looking at Madara's state, the latter didn't look good too. It has been 2 hours since the two started fighting, and the sky was turning bright. In fact, Masahiko has been slightly losing. In the end, his strength was still a little inferior to Uchiha Madara and Senjo Hashirama. Masahiko thought of cheating and use his points to restore his strength, but the colossal Susanoo in the sky collapsed, and Madara could no longer maintain his young face. Humph, is it time? Madara snorted coldly and sat down. Masahiko let out a sigh of relief. He was barely standing up at that point. Madara, in the end you won. Masahiko shook his head bitterly. Old man, are you pitying me? In the end, the one who kept his life is victorious. Masahiko felt stunned and quickly shook his head. Do you say that to comfort yourself every night? You think you won against Hashirama? Madara's face turned slightly dark, then after a moment of pondering, he repeated again, Old man, you really play dirty. Masahiko smiled, wanna go again? After this sentence, both of them fell silent. After a while, Masahiko slowly said, Madara, do you regret it? Madara was stunned, then firmly replied, no. Is that so? Well, I knew the answer already. Storm release, laser circus. Masahiko performed a hand sign, then the laser rushed out of his finger. A moment later, several screams came from behind Madara. Sensing that the battle was over, Kusagakuer sent some spies to check out the situation. Old man, how can you use this technique? Masahiko shook his head, knock it off already, you're calling me an old man? Look at yourself. Madara was growing older every second. Life, oldness, sickness, death, is human nature, old fellow, even you will experience it someday, and I will be underground, waiting for you. Masahiko was stunned for a moment, then he smiled, well, you wanted it to be your last words, but I can clearly feel that you still have some chakra remaining, you won't die anytime soon. Madara turned his head, angrily, old man, are you kidding me? Just when he was laughing, Masahiko felt a sudden severe pain. Masahiko shook his head while putting his hand on his stomach, my stomach hurts. I didn't have a chance to go to the toilet. The battle is over. More and more people are coming, don't you dare die by their hand. Masahiko hesitantly stood up. I will have to say goodbye, Madara. And flew toward the south. His stomach hurts, and he needs to go to the toilet? What a ridiculous reason. However, goodbye, old man. Madara mumbled these words, as he was looking at the figure walking slowly in the distance. I will not die in the hand of these small flies. The figure gradually approached, revealing its face. Madara frowned slightly. What is this guy? A clone with Hashirama's cells? White Zetsu slowly replied, Uchiha Madara, it seems like you need my help. Masahiko flew toward the south far from Konoha. The destination was to Shikotsu Forest. After all, he really had a strong stomachache. After he opened the seventh gate for so long and drained his chakra, Black Zetsu saw an opportunity and started fighting back to break the seal. Thus, he needed to find a safe environment to reinforce the seal. Half the distance, Masahiko could no longer bear it. Looking at his feet, he saw a deserted cave. There! Masahiko said, then quickly flew toward it. Red Yang Formation. Masahiko used a weaker version of the 4 Red Yang Formation to block the cave entrance. Now, I will deal with you. Masahiko really took sealing Black Zetsu seriously this time and basically used every seal he knows on his body. Finally, not feeling Black Zetsu struggling anymore, Masahiko sighed with relief. He basically had no chakra left in his body, and his consciousness started getting a little vague. He concentrated what left of his energy to mobilize chakra and perform a summoning beast technique. Katsuya-sama, sorry to trouble you, please keep me alive. The world was getting darker, it felt as if he was falling asleep. Katsuya seemed like it was saying something, but Masahiko couldn't hear it clearly as he barely was conscious. Suddenly, familiar Chinese characters appeared before his eyes, mostly changed the main story of Naruto World, the death of Uchiha Madara. Reward, 50/2*10, witness points. Madara is dead? He killed himself? Masahiko was sure that Madara wouldn't let those small fries kill him. I lost half of the witness points in the Rinnegan. This was the last thought that crossed his mind before he fell into a coma. At the same time, near the Konobe Bridge, Hiruzen arrived with the group of elites from Konoha. Mito-sama Mito was among the ranks. Mito entered the Kyuubi mode, sensed the place, then shook her head a moment later. Can't feel Madara's chakra, but second grandpa should be fine. He was flying south a moment ago. Hiruzen felt slightly relieved. It seems that Elder Masahiko has won. Well, we will go back and wait for him. Tsunade in the team also breathed a sigh of relief but didn't notice the strange light shining in the eyes of her teammate Orochimaru. A small snake suddenly came out of his sleeve, then slithered across the ground and took a few drops of blood. As time goes by, Masahiko slowly woke up, and after a little activity, Masahiko regained his energy. Masahiko looked around, but he couldn't find Katsuya and estimated that the technique was lifted on its own after a while. However, the Red Yang Formation has also disappeared from the entrance and got replaced by a huge spider web. Masahiko looked puzzled, what the hell? How long I've been sleeping? Masahiko took a few steps, then he used his fire release to remove the spider web. Walking out, the dazzling sunlight made him squint slightly, and suddenly he felt an unbearable severe pain coming from his waist. Second grandpa! Hashirama's shout from far made Masahiko stunned. Old man, die! Masahiko looked up and saw the dreaded face of the Susanoo in its second stage. He glanced down at the huge wound in his waist while feeling shocked, then recalled the place and the time. What the hell? Hashirama is still alive, this is the war where Uchiha Izumi died. Did Madara trap me into his genjutsu? Masahiko gradually started losing his consciousness. Am I dying? Well, the story is over then. Chapter 149, Nightmare? In a cave, in the southwestern part of the Land of Fire, Masahiko was asleep and sweating coldly all over his body. His body suddenly twitched, then he opened his eyes, feeling slightly dizzy. No what? Was it a nightmare? Masahiko looked around, muttering. After a while, he slowly breathed a sigh of relief. It's been a long time since I had a nightmare, it's quite scary. If that battle ended like this, I'm afraid the Uchiha would have unified the Shinobi world. Masahiko looked up, and Katsuya wasn't there, the Red Yang Formation completely disappeared, and it was replaced by a huge spider web. What the hell? How long I've been sleeping? Wait a minute. Masahiko got startled upon feeling that this scene was inexplicably familiar. This is exactly like that nightmare. Earth release, hardening technique. Masahiko used a hand sign, then hardened his entire body, turning to something similar to a golem. He used a fire release to get rid of the spider web, then walked out of the cave slowly. When the dazzling sunlight reflected on his eyes, he forced himself not to close them. He didn't come this time," Masahiko said in relief. The forest was still there, but Masahiko felt that it was a bit lush. "Well, it seems like I've been here for a while. First, let's go and see where Madara is, the Rinnegan can't be left outside." Masahiko flew to the north and returned to the previous battlefield. What is happening here? The landform in front of him has completely changed. It should be filled with the water that Masahiko has unleashed previously during the battle, but it didn't. Many civilians were wandering around, and some others were even working on a bridge. Masahiko slowly landed, catching everyone's attention, and finally, an old man came over. "Are you a ninja?" Masahiko frowned. Everyone saw him flying obviously, but he still didn't get recognized. What happened to the previous bridge here? Since he wasn't recognized, he could only ask awkwardly. The old man nodded. "Well, it happened more than a year ago in a shinobi war, and the Shinobi bridge was blown up by the hokage. Now that the war has stopped, we can only rebuild it." Masahiko nodded. "So that's what happened." Suddenly he felt something was wrong. Shinobi bridge? It got blown up more than a year ago? Masahiko looked dumbfounded. "Again, how long have I been sleeping? Wasn't the Shinobi bridge blown up by Minato?" Masahiko looked puzzled, "But the bridge was really destroyed, I should get more information." Masahiko's unpleasant feeling was getting stronger every second, and he finally decided to fly toward Konoha. 10 minutes later, outside of Konoha, Masahiko looked at the huge hokage wall while slightly stunned. Hashirama, Tobirama, Hiruzen, Minato. Has it really been so many years in the blink of an eye? Masahiko felt that some areas were slightly damaged, but he didn't know what went wrong. Konoha's gatekeepers have been replaced, and Masahiko didn't know them. He walked in and used a simple genjutsu to make everyone unaware of him. The village was slightly damaged, and many villagers were working on rebuilding some of the places. It looked as if they have just got attacked. No way. Masahiko had a bad feeling about this, and he quickly walked toward the hokage building. Along the way, he heard a lot of the villagers talking. The Kyuubi. The fourth hokage. Sacrifice. That monster. Minato sacrificed himself to seal the Kyuubi? How can this be? Masahiko felt really sad. When he reached the hokage building, an umbu appeared and stopped him. Masahiko was stunned. Even though he wasn't good at genjutsu, his LV8 yin attribute wasn't just for show. He didn't expect anyone in the umbu department to see through it. "Who are you? How dare you use genjutsu to sneak into Konoha?" Masahiko sighed. "You didn't even recognize me, did the umbu also change?" Just when he finished that sentence, the umbu shivered slightly, then replied excitedly, "Is it Uzumaki Masahiko?" Masahiko was startled, then nodded slightly. He immediately took off the mask, revealing an unusually familiar face. "Masahiko-sama, I didn't expect you to be alive." "Hiruzen?" Masahiko said subconsciously, then reacted, "Shinosuke. You're an umbu at this age? I was out for so long, tell me, what happened to Konoha and the Uzumaki?" Shinosuke hesitated, then said, "Masahiko-sama, please go upstairs. My father and the 3 elders are there. If you have any questions, they should be the one to answer you." Masahiko nodded, then walked into the building with a lot of anxiety in his heart. None of the other umbu tried to stop him, and he walked all the way to the top floor. The moment he pushed the door, the 4 people inside immediately looked at him. Masahiko was on the spot. He had no problem finding Hiruzen and Danzo there, but the other 2 were actually Homuram Midokado and Koharu Yudiden. "You 2 bastards? How did you become elders? Where's Kagami?" Masahiko said. The 4 looked stunned. Hiruzen has even rubbed his eyes in disbelief, and said excitedly, "Elder Masahiko? Are you still alive? Where did you go after the battle with Uchiha Madara?" Masahiko waved his hand, "Forget about that and answer my questions." Hiruzen was about to reply, but Danzo suddenly stopped him. "We can't be sure that this person in front of us is Elder Masahiko. Maybe it's someone else who has used the transformation technique." Faced with doubt, Masahiko wasn't angry, also he wasn't in a hurry, and he actually loves this part, with a move of his finger, the four floated slightly in the air. He's really Masahiko-sama. Yuditen and Mitokado said while Hiruzen looked excited. However, noticing Masahiko's serious expression, Hiruzen hesitated, then shook his head. Shortly after your battle with Uchiha Madara, the Second Shinobi World War restarted, and Kagami sacrificed his life against Tsunagakure. Masahiko looked anxious all of a sudden, his body has even shivered while he asked, what about the Uzumaki? The moment Hiruzen lowered his head, Masahiko's heart sank. Say it. What happened to the Uzumaki? Hiruzen quickly replied, Elder Masahiko, the land of the whirlpool is all right, but... He hesitated again and said, in the face of Kirigakure's invasion, your disciple, Kanikiro ended up opening the 8th gate. Is that so? Masahiko couldn't bear it any longer and slowly sat down on the chair beside him. What about Konoha? What happened to Minato? You know Minato? Hiruzen asked first, then said, during the childbirth of Kushina, a masked man suddenly attacked them and released the Kyuubi. In order to protect the village, Minato used the Shiki Fujin technique and sealed him back. He sacrificed himself for the sake of the village. What did you say? Masahiko was stunned and yelled without even noticing. Where did the Shiki Fujin technique came from? This is still a nightmare. 2 nightmares in a row, this is definitely one of Black Zetsu's mischiefs. Chapter 150, Kicking the Hero's Butt. Tell me more about what happened to Konoha in these years. Masahiko inconsiderably sat in the main seat that initially belonged to Hiruzen and said expectantly. He had a hunch before, but it started to look clearer to him. It stands to the reason that if he had really been in a coma for so many years, his age in the status bar would have been raised by a dozen years, but there was no change. They looked at each other, then Hiruzen said, Elder Masahiko, you can rest for now, we'll talk later. It's okay, just tell me what happened in these past few years. For example, did Sakumo committed suicide? The 4 on the opposite side looked surprised. Have you been hiding in the village all these years? Masahiko shook his head, no, but I predicted it. I also know that the Senju basically doesn't exist as a clan anymore, Tsunade is suffering from a phobia, and the Uchiha should have the intention of rebellion. As Masahiko started mentioning these events one by one, the others across from him looked more and more amazed. It seems that Masahiko has figured out these big secrets on his own, it's as if he's connected to the heart of the village. Oh, yes, and Orochimaru has defected. Speaking of this, Masahiko frowned. When did Orochimaru defect again? Hiruzen looked shocked at the opposite side, Elder Masahiko, why do you think Orochimaru is gonna defect? It didn't happen yet? Masahiko whispered, feeling that he has exposed Orochimaru's big plan, but he didn't care much, it was just a dream anyway. It's okay, we'll talk about it later. Besides what I said, what else? The 4 of them looked at each other, then Danzo took the initiative to say, we're gathered here to discuss the issue with the new Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, Namikaze Naruto. Masahiko was stunned upon hearing the name, they actually called him Namikaze Naruto, which he didn't expect. But when he looked at their strange reactions, he understood that they planned to call him Uzumaki Naruto, but fearing that the surname Uzumaki would give Masahiko permission to intervene too much, Danzo temporarily changed it to Namikaze Naruto. Masahiko smiled, what's there to discuss? Danzo continued to say, this time when the Kyuubi broke the seal, he caused Konoha heavy losses. I think that the next Jinchuriki should be strictly controlled to prevent this from happening again. Hiruzen hesitated for a while, then said, Danzo, Naruto is, after all, Minato's child, if you do this. Hiruzen, even if you don't want to monitor him, you will still have to hide the fact that he's a Jinchuriki from the villagers. Mitokado said. No, for the sake of the village, he must be controlled. Danzo continued. As they continued the discussion, they seemed like they've forgotten about Masahiko. He didn't interrupt, waiting for the conclusion they would come up with. Hiruzen, you're too weak. Danzo shouted, which made everyone silent for a moment, except Masahiko, who sighed, then suddenly flashed behind Danzo and kicked his butt. Weak? Danzo was unprepared, and he was struck right in the buttocks, then flew and hit his head against the front wall. Elder Masahiko, what are you? Hiruzen looked surprised and hesitated to speak. The other 2 elders also looked shocked. They didn't know whether they should check on Danzo, or just watch quietly. Masahiko ignored them, feeling that he get rid of the burden that he was carrying over his shoulders for so long. What a relief, I really hated this version of Danzo in my previous life. I guess I will just take this opportunity to kick his butt. Danzo didn't suffer any injuries. He slowly shook his head and stood up with a weird expression that Masahiko didn't know whether it was anger or pain. Elder Masahiko, why? Masahiko sighed, it's nothing really, but it's just a bit unpleasant to see you. Danzo's countenance changed and finally snorted without any action. So, you're not afraid of me, huh? Masahiko sighed with emotionally. The Uchiha clan didn't annihilate yet, but it seems that Danzo has already transplanted Hashirama's cells in a few Sharingan eyes. Everyone kept looking at him waiting what he's going to do next, but Masahiko only smiled and said, you can continue, I will just watch. Danzo hesitated and said, Hiruzen, we still have to control the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. Boom. With a loud noise, Danzo flew out again. Sure enough, I really can't bear it anymore. Masahiko sighed again. Elder Masahiko, Danzo was a little prepared this time and didn't hit the wall. His face has darkened, he was kicked in the butt twice, which was already an insult the first time. Danzo stared at him, coldly, even if I can't beat you, I will fight back. Masahiko ignored his cold gazes, and since he already kicked him twice, and it felt so good, he simply took advantage of this opportunity to kick him a few more times. Danzo's butt became like the back of a bumper car, and no matter how he guards it, he kept getting pulled by Masahiko's attractive force, and finally get kicked in his butt. Huh? Masahiko suddenly kicked the air, breaking his kicking spree, which made him frown slightly. Danzo, who should have supposedly kicked by him, disappeared, then appeared in another position. Izanagi? Really? Do you regard your butt that much? Masahiko smiled, however, nothing is invincible. Seal Masahiko was about to use a seal, but Hiruzen stopped him. Masahiko-sama, you really don't need to embarrass Danzo anymore. Even after all these years of conflicts and disagreements, Hiruzen couldn't bear watching Danzo so miserable. Masahiko smiled and waved his hand, forget it, I kicked him so much that I feel so refreshed, so I won't embarrass him anymore. Then we will meet again. While Hiruzen looked stunned, Masahiko closed his eyes and used a one-handed seal with his right, Genjutsu release. Note, Genjutsu release, Kai. It's the method Sakura used in the arc Konoha Crush to break the Genjutsu, and also the technique Jiraiya taught Naruto, saying that any type of Genjutsu can be broken if the user can interrupt the chakra flow himself. Masahiko opened his eyes, and saw Hiruzen looking at him extremely confused. Danzo on the side seemed to be still in pain and angry. No way? Masahiko was stunned for a moment, and somewhat at a loss. No, there's no way this isn't a Genjutsu. Masahiko whispered, then it must be because I have insufficient yin release. Note, most Genjutsu also fall under the categorization of yin release, since yin release uses spiritual energy to control imagination, and creating the form out of nothingness. Masahiko glanced at the remaining witness point, and there were 450 points left. And once he gritted his teeth, he added 400 points to the yin attribute and upgraded it to LV9. This time, it should be fine. Genjutsu release. The picture in front of Masahiko broke, and his consciousness suddenly fell into darkness. In the cave, Masahiko slowly opened his eyes, hearing Katsuya's voice. Masahiko-sama, are you awake? Masahiko sat straightly, then looked at his surroundings. Katsuya was still there, then Red Yang formation didn't disappear, he's not in a damn nightmare anymore. Chinese characters suddenly crossed in front of him, witness and substantial change. The main story of Naruto World, sealing Black Zetsu. Reward, 50, *8, witness points. Just substantial? Killing him is completely changed then? Masahiko thought to himself. He looked around then and smiled. This is the correct way to wake up.